Hello, Topical, and welcome back to your favorite NBA coverage with Aradh and me. And we're going to be talking about the second round action in the NBA, I guess you would call it the semifinal series. And yeah, we're going to get into the four playoff series that happened, those being the Celtics versus the 76ers, Rockets versus the Jazz, Cavaliers versus the Raptors, and the Warriors versus the Pelicans. Talk about how we're all super disappointed that those only went 5 games, and yeah, we're going to get into predictions for the Western and Eastern Conference Finals, and should be a good discussion. Are you excited, Rod?
Yes, indeed. There's a lot to talk about, a lot of compelling matchups and things to discuss, so I'm glad to get started.
Okay, well, to compel everyone, I suppose we should start with the most boring series then. So, which one do you think that was?
To me, it was the Warriors-Pelicans series simply because I thought that I feel like my expectations for that series were the highest, and then it ended up just kind of being the typical the Warriors are this and you can't stop them kind of thing. But I mean, that's just my opinion. I actually thought, there's a couple games in the Toronto series were pretty compelling because, LeBron had a game winner in one of them, and the first game was decided by 1 point. Then the Utah series, you had Donovan Mitchell leave when they looked like they might be able to win that game. And then you had a close game that Utah ended up winning. I think Joe Ingles missed some time in that series, so that was interesting. Obviously, it was interesting to see how they adapted without having Ricky Rubio out there. And then the Boston Philly series was actually a pretty competitive five. Some of the scores, the games kind of. I think there were about 3 games that seemed like they could go either way. So to me, it was the Warriors Pelicans series because it was literally just your standard. Your better team wins first 2 games at home. Home team rallies and wins game 3. Better team gets it back together and wins 4 and 5. It was kind of like a typical 5 game series like we expect to see.
Yeah, definitely. And I really thought that first game of the Cavs Raptors series made the series very interesting. Like it was either going to be okay, LeBron just stole the heart out of the Raptors and they're not going to be competitive at all because of the rest of the series because it was a super close game the entire way, and obviously they just had that LeBron had the amazing 3 pointer to seal the game. But yeah, I thought that the rest of the series was going to go down just like game one, and it just did not. The Raptors fell apart right after that.
Yeah, I think Cleveland Toronto was interesting because before the series started, everyone like throughout the year has has kind of been saying like, oh, this Raptors team is different. This is the year, like top 5 offense, top 5 defense, best bench in the league, coach of the year, Dwayne Casey, 59 wins. Could have been 62 or 63 had we just, I guess not rested some players down the stretch and all that stuff. Yeah, I mean, I think it really showed that this whole idea that this narrative that people have been building about the Raptors having sort of or not the Raptors actually, about Kyle Lowry and DeMar DeRozan sort of having a mental block when it comes to, playing LeBron James. I feel like it kind of, made a lot of those claims pretty valid because if you just watch DeMar DeRozan, he sort of just like towards the end of each game, there was one of the 5 games he didn't even play in the fourth quarter,
Yeah.
and then or 4 games he didn't play one of the fourth quarters, and then in another one of the games, he he didn't even look like he wanted to be on the court. I mean, like he was just kind of holding the ball, being sort of passive with it. He wasn't being aggressive. He wasn't trying to create a mid-range shot. He wasn't trying to create a play for anybody else. He wasn't trying to get to the basket. He was just kind of out there. And I don't really know what the deal is with him. So, I mean, a stat sheet basically of DeMar DeRozan's regular season in comparison to his playoffs, in comparison to his series against Cleveland in particular. So maybe we can get into that if I haven't already.
Yeah, I can't recall myself, and either way, with all the hours we've recorded, I'm sure the audience would have forgotten by now.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's for sure.
So, I mean, yeah, like that was a pretty short series, obviously, and yeah, I'm trying to think of right now if like there's a good Michael Jordan comparison for like a team that he always faced like early on in the playoffs, and like he just ran through them every time, and like they would have good regular season success, and then they would run into Michael Jordan, and they would just look helpless, and it would really suck. I can't think of anyone off the top of my head. Do you have anyone in mind?
I'm not sure how many times they played, but I feel like possibly Patrick Ewing's Knicks might have. I'm not exactly sure. I know it was the reverse. I know that he was that team for the Bad Boy Pistons, and until, of course, they got old. But unfortunately, I don't think this Raptors core is going to stick around long enough to outweigh LeBron. I don't think he's going to age, and then it's going to because like the thing with that, like the difference there is like I don't think the Raptors truly they don't have a player who's like like they don't have an emerging superstar. Like I think this is as good as DeMar DeRozan's ever going to be, and Kyle Lowry is already he's like 33 now, maybe 32, and this is probably as good as he's ever going to be as well. So. It's a shame for the Raptors. I'm just kind of interested to see what their offseason moves are going to be. But yeah,
Yeah, and like it just seems like they don't have anything going for him against LeBron, and it seems like the only thing they can really hope for in the offseason is that he goes to the West, which like that's a toss up at this point. But yeah, like they just do not have any answer to him, and it doesn't seem like Dwayne Casey knows how to coach against him, unlike Brad Stevens says we'll get into later. But yeah, like it really seems like they're helpless against him, and every year in the playoffs, it's just crossing your fingers that you get to face him in the finals and not the second round, so you can at least get that far. But their big problem is it's not quite as bad as the Trailblazers, but like they don't have a lot that they can do with their team because everyone on their team has a contract that's like over 2 years from now, aside from like not Norman Powell. I forget who it was, but like there's one player who's like becoming a free agent this year, but everyone else is like locked up for 2 years, which is good if you have a team that you think you're going to be keeping around for a while, but when you're coming off of your third playoff exit where like you do not look competitive in the series that you lose in, like that's not a good thing, and like it doesn't seem like they really have an opportunity to blow things up, and I don't think they could have a better regular season than they had this year, and I mean the only option unfortunately is just to run things back, and I don't know what, like just hope that DeMar DeRozan and Kyle Lowry can get it together in the playoffs, but like at this point, you don't really have 3 playoffs in a row where you suck and then you suddenly just become the playoff god or something.
yeah, and I think I found what I had written. I'm not again if for any fans who remember, any viewers who have heard me say this. I apologize. I'm just going to run through it real quick again. So DeMar DeRozan's regular season stats and shooting splits versus his playoff stats and shooting splits. I'm going to be going points, rebounds, assists, and then field goal percentage, 3-point percentage, free throw percentage. So in the 16 regular season, he went 24, 5, and 4 on 45, 34, 85. But then in the playoffs, he went 24 and 2 on 39, 15, 81. And then that dropped to 17 per game against Cleveland. And then that's in 16, sorry. And then in 17, he scored 27, 5, and 4 on 47, 27, 84 in the 17 regular season. And then in the 2017 playoffs, 22, 5, 3 on 43, 6, and I mean 6% from the 3-point line.
Yeah.
89, and then he dropped from 27 in the regular season, 22 in the playoffs to 20 per game in this series against Cleveland. And this season it was a similar thing. I think he averaged about 23, 5, and 4 in the regular season, and then he was averaging, I think 21, 5, and 4 in the series against Washington, and then came the series against Cleveland, and he was averaging I think like 16 points a game. I think he didn't have a single game where he had over 25. He had a 23. He had a 23-point game, a 22-point game, then a 13-point game, and then an 8-point game. So the whole series was kind of downhill for him.
Yeah, do you have any record of his usage percentage compared to like the regular season and the playoffs? Because it seems like every time in the playoffs he gets worse, obviously as his usage goes up, as most people do. But like for him, it really starts to drop off because whenever he gets into isolation ball, the team sucks obviously, but then like it forces him to have to really either drive to the basket and like hope for the best, or like take a long two, which obviously the defense wants him to do, or take a free, where as you mentioned, he has a very poor chance of making it in the playoffs because. I don't know why. Maybe he's just afraid of the 3-point line or something, or just I don't.
I don't have his shooting. I don't have his usage percentage in front of me, but I'm sure that there's some correlation. Because I mean, like even if you don't have any statistics in front of you, like if you just watch like him in like he literally devolves into this isolation mid-range shooter. Like whenever things aren't going well, I don't think that he has. I don't think he has, I'm not sure what the right term would be for it, but he doesn't have the sort of, wherewithal to, trust his offense. I feel like it's like they made this huge change into adapting their team into being, including more threes, more layups, obviously gearing more towards analytics to kind of go along with, the whole Warriors Rockets kind of thing and all that. And they did a great job in the regular season. They they were the third best team in the league after Houston and Golden State in the regular season. And I mean, that's legitimate. I mean, I know a lot of people say stuff like, oh, Toronto 59-win team, it doesn't count because they're in the Eastern Conference, but they actually had I did the calculations, and they had an 80% winning percentage against the East, and I believe they had an 80. Let me just double check on this. They had a 63 winning percent, a 63% winning percentage against the West teams. So then, if you apply that and put them in the Western Conference, right? So you multiply 63% by 50 games, and then 80% by 32 games, excuse me. Then they would have been a 55-win team in the Western Conference, and a 55-win team in the Western Conference this year would have been the third seed right after Houston and Golden State. So, I don't understand why people are out there saying, oh, it's the East. LeBron is not an accomplishment sweeping the Raptors to the Raptors. The Raptors were a good team. They would have been a 55, or, even if you disagree with that, they would definitely would have been the third seed in the Western Conference this year. I mean, it's just strange. They played so well in the regular season, and then it comes down to critical moments in the playoffs, and then they just devolve completely into what they've been when they've been unsuccessful, which is, Kyle Lowry and DeMar DeRozan take turns isolating. They stop trusting their teammates. They just try and play two-man hero ball where, they try and take turns, and then eventually it gets to a point where DeMar DeRozan realizes, oh shit, I'm really not that good.
Yeah.
And then Kyle Lowry is like, well, damn, I'm not that good either. And then it's just kind of like, oh, we lost. Because, I mean, if you think about it, like, game one in that series was literally the only chance that, to me, in my opinion, that's the biggest game in that franchise's history. Because if you give yourself the confidence to win game one, I definitely feel like you have enough, that'll be like a good thing to have in your back. Like, oh yeah, we finally won one at home. We broke the streak of us losing to LeBron. We can win this series. We're the better team. Like, it literally gets you into all of that. And, then they go out and LeBron has the worst game he's ever had against them. He's shooting 40% from the field, has a horrible night from the three-point line, a horrible night from the free throw line. His shooting on the night, he shot 30 times and he only made 12 shots. He shot 8 threes, he only made 1. He shot 6 free throws, he only made 1. And despite the fact that Cleveland, given how poor their roster has been playing, the fact that they won, even though LeBron had a bad night, that was just so demoralizing for them, because they probably watched the Indiana series and were like, oh wow, all we got to do is get LeBron to have a bad night and then we got it, we're golden. And that's exactly what happened in game one. And then Kevin Love reappeared and had 31 points. They just seem to have, I don't really know what it is. To me, there's no reasonable explanation for why Kyle Lowry and DeMar DeRozan should not be outplayed by George Hill and Kevin Love. And Kevin Love's a good player, but I think by this point we all know that he's really not some superstar caliber player. He's he's an all-star because he plays in the East. That's honestly the truth.
Yeah.
And, he probably he was selected as a replacement, I'm pretty sure, this year.
Yeah.
So, it wasn't even an all-star, and if Kristaps was healthy, I think he was Kristaps Porzingis' replacement.
Yeah, so one of the last.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, exactly. So, yeah. So, it's a sad thing for the Raptors because, they kind of seem to get their spirit back in it for game 3. And then LeBron hit that, the leaning off balance one-legged floater going to his left. And then, I think that was really I think game 1 was enough of a dagger in the hearts already, because you have them, there was a stretch where they missed. They shot 16 times in the last 5 minutes, I think, and they only made 3. And then prior to that, there was a larger stretch of they'd only made 1 of their last 16 attempts or something. So they had some crazy scoring drought essentially, and then Jonas Valanciunas missed 3 easy. Looks right underneath the basket. He got off. He missed a layup. He grabbed an offensive rebound. He missed another layup. He grabbed an offensive rebound. He missed a layup again. He grabbed another offensive rebound, and then I think he got the ball taken from him before he could go up for another layup. So 4 offensive possessions, 4 offensive rebounds on 1 possession. They didn't convert on any of them. And then, it's not like Cleveland played fantastic either. They were by no means, putting a clinic on them or anything offensively. Like I just said, if LeBron's having an off night, then the team as a whole is not going to be playing that well. So, the fact that they blew that game was really, was really pretty bad. And then then you watch game 2, and it's like, oh, the Raptors are a professional team; they should bounce back. But no, they didn't. They hung their heads, they sulked, and then they lost by like 20 something. And then game 3, they finally came back and got their head in the game, and then there they were, and they were playing confidently. It was 1-of-3, and then LeBron brings the ball up full court with 7 seconds left, and then he hits a buzzer beater to win the game, which is also dumb because that's, to me, a coaching issue, because I definitely believe that if LeBron James is bringing the ball up full court, then you should trap him so that he can't get a shot off.
Yeah.
To me, that's pretty simple. He was being defended one-on-one by a rookie, OG Anunoby, which that was obviously a mistake. And then in game 4, by that point, everyone knows, no one's ever come back from a 3-0 series deficit. So Raptors hung their head and they lost again. Overall, it wasn't what I expected. I really thought this Toronto team would be more of a version of the 2016 team that was able to get 2 games off of them, because that was obviously before they were afraid of LeBron. And then, they just, for whatever reason, and I don't want to keep saying Raptors because, the other Raptors actually played fine. Like, they played as they would, I guess. Like, OG Anunoby didn't seem to have any issue taking the challenge of guarding LeBron.
Yeah, the bench mob was fine as well.
I'm sorry, say that again?
And the bench mob was fine as well. Like, it wasn't otherworldly, but, it was good.
Yeah, and Fred VanVleet actually had a pretty disappointing game in the first game because he took the wide open 3 to win the game at game 1, and then he missed. He had an open look at the end of regular, because game 1 went to overtime actually.
Yep.
And Fred VanVleet missed the jump shot to clinch the game in regulation, and then he missed the shot to clinch the game in overtime. I get Fred VanVleet is your best bench player, but I really feel like DeMar DeRozan or Kyle Lowry, being your best players and best shot makers, should have the ball in their hands. If the game is on, if you have an opportunity to win the game, I feel like you should go with someone a little bit more proven than a rookie off the bench. But is he a rookie?
Yeah, I believe so. I can check.
Yeah, I'm not sure whether or not he is. Maybe he's played a couple games somewhere else. But regardless, it was a weird series for the Raptors. But I do have to say that even though they were madly disappointing, and even though it was all this kind of mumbo jumbo where they fell apart, I really think it's a bad idea for them to fire their coach.
Wait, they fired Dwayne Casey?
They did. They fired.
Oh, wow! And he might win Coach of the Year. Oh, wow!
Yeah,
Holy
and
crap!
He won the peer voting for Coach of the Year actually.
Yeah.
And he was fired 2 days after.
Holy crap!
So, yeah, Dwayne Casey was fired, and I gotta say, that guy, obviously he has his flaws as a coach, but I don't think they're going to get anyone better.
No, definitely not.
He was a part of the reason that franchise changed. Like, it was one of the worst franchises in the history of the league, and it's been a winning franchise for the past, I don't know, I guess 6 years maybe or something like that, ever since they acquired Kyle Lowry, and Dwayne Casey was a huge part of that. And I really don't understand what they think they're doing. Because it's definitely, Patrick Patterson, actually a former, Toronto player. He's in Oklahoma City now. Someone asked him what he thought about Dwayne Casey being fired, and he said he's a scapegoat, which is exactly what it is.
Yep.
It's not Dwayne Casey's fault. It was entirely DeMar DeRozan and Kyle Lowry's fault. And I'm probably going to pin this series on DeMar DeRozan specifically because, Kyle Lowry had a game where I'm not sure which game it was, but he was shooting he shot 8 of 10 from the field, and he had 24 points, and he was 5 of 5 or 6 of 6 from 3. He had an amazing game, and he obviously he's a bulldog defensively, so he was doing as good of a job as he could on whoever he was guarding, and I'm sure he did a fine job. But DeMar DeRozan, on the other hand, is we're at this point in his career, and he's sort of one of those stars that doesn't really improve. He's one of those stars who, once they became considered a star, they stopped improving, and I don't appreciate that in players because I feel like you can definitely become a better 3-point shooter if you take an entire offseason to work on it. It's you know what I mean? It's if you're a great mid-range shooter, why do you spend your offseason continuing to practice what you're already good at when you could be getting better at something else? It's not like you're going to forget how to do something else. And, he's been the same player for a couple of years. He'll score in the 20s. He'll have great scoring nights, and then he'll just never develop a 3-point shot and won't ever become a better defender. He's actually a pretty poor defender. I think I checked, not this season, but last season, 2016-17 season, out of all 518 NBA players, I believe he ranked 429th in defensive win shares
Oh wow,
individually.
that's bad.
He's pretty bad. He's in like Andrew Wiggins territory in terms of being a bad defender. So
Yeah, which is not a good
yeah,
thing. And obviously, I thought he was going to be better in the playoffs this year because it does seem like he does improve every year in the regular season. It's just every time we get to the playoffs, he just reverts back to the same bad mid-range shooter who makes it in the teens or even the single digits in terms of his 3-point percentage, and he's just not reliable at all. And like for a team that's trying to make him a franchise player alongside Kyle Lowry, you can't have that. And I mean, it comes back to like the age-old question of, oh, do you prefer a player who is super consistent in the regular season and like he'll give you great minutes, but then like he's gonna suck in the playoffs or whatever, versus the player that is terrible in the regular season, like an Eli Manning, but then comes up big in the playoffs. I mean, like it's a give and take right there, but obviously. If you want to be a superstar, you can't come up short in the playoffs, and like DeMar DeRozan and Kyle Lowry constantly do, and ultimately, no one's going to remember the Raptors because of that. And like it just really sucks for them. So
and I mean honestly though, I really feel like because it's sort of become this stigma of like sticking it on Kyle Lowry and DeMar DeRozan, and I mean like because I think a lot of this stems from I think if you remember 2 years ago in the playoffs, Kyle Lowry had that he had that atrocious start where he was like I think he was shooting like 32% from the field or something.
yeah,
But I mean like he had a horrible stretch, but like he played really well in the Cleveland series in 2016, and he played really well last year too, and this year. It's always more like it's like you the thing for the Raptors is to win for them, you need both halves of their big two to come together, right? Like they have to like both halves have to meet in the middle, and like Kyle Lowry is like he's always in the right spots, like he's always doing the right thing. Obviously he'll have a bad game here or there. I mean, like, it's normal. Like, because he's not like a superstar, but he's definitely more consistent than DeMar DeRozan. It's just like DeMar DeRozan never gives him the other half. And I mean, like, I like DeMar DeRozan as a player a lot. Actually, like, I enjoy watching him. I think it's cool, kind of to see like a throwback type of player. Like, he's really like he's like reminiscent of watching like a Kobe Bryant, kind of like
yeah,
because Kobe Bryant is like he attacks in the mid range mostly. Like he's not a great 3-point shooter, but occasionally he can make one or two. He goes to the rim, like he shoots a lot of free throw. Like he's your typical '90s scorer basically, and it's cool to watch him. It's just you look at him and like it's like he doesn't develop anything other than like he doesn't change things ever about anything except his shooting. Like he doesn't develop as a defender. You don't see him adding new moves to his arsenal. Like I think I've only seen him do like he does kind of the same sorts of like pump fakes and moves in the post and like everything he does kind of the same. It's like he hasn't developed as a playmaker at all. He hasn't become a better rebounder. He definitely hasn't been a better defender. Not better about getting in the passing lanes. He doesn't even shoot corner threes, which is the easiest spot on the floor to shoot a three from. And he like it's just at some like I hate to say it, but like at this point in the NBA, even though it shouldn't be like this per se, like to be a superstar, you have to be able to shoot threes. Like it's like there's no superstar in the league can't like even Anthony Davis.
Well, Ben Simmons, but I mean he's essentially the best driver in the league.
That'll probably be an issue for him later on. Like I feel like it's masked by the fact that he's surrounded on the floor with players who can all shoot. Like okay, I'll phrase it differently. Then you don't necessarily have to like if you're not a player who can like if you're not a player who can create 3-point shots for other people, you have to be able to shoot the three. Because I think even if LeBron wasn't an amazing even if LeBron was a really bad 3-point shooter, like he wouldn't be as good of a player, but he would still be a superstar because of his ability to drive to the basket whenever he wanted, and because of his ability to create 3-point shots for everybody else.
Yeah.
Like
okay.
His scoring would probably drop from it was 28 points per game this year. It probably dropped to like I don't know 24, maybe 24, something like that, 24 or 23. But he would still be able to give you 8 assists and 9 rebounds. You know what I mean? Like it would just be an issue with scoring for him. But it's like with DeMar DeRozan, it's like his inability to shoot threes kind of it holds back the team because you can't play with him off the ball basically.
Yeah.
And I feel like because the one thing that we see all the time with Houston is like they literally just take turns because and it gives them such a luxury of being able to do that because the defense always has to worry about one primary ball handler, and then they always have to worry about a great shooter who's playing off the ball. Like basically the way that it works is if Kyle Lowry has the ball, you can just sag off DeMar DeRozan because he's not going to do anything, and then if he's in the post, you're just going to put a taller defender on him, and then he's not going to be able to get as good of a shot off, and then he has to take a bad shot, and sometimes he's good at making those, and some nights they won't fall, and that's really all you got to do to defend the Raptors. And they changed that this year, but then they reverted right back to it in the playoffs, which is ridiculous. So, I mean, it was a shame seeing what happened to them, but at the same time, it's like DeMar DeRozan needs to make improvements to his game. He's got to be able to make plays for other people. He's probably got to get those assist totals from being like 4 a game to like maybe 6 or 7 per game, honestly, like if he wants to be a viable playmaker.
Yeah, for his usage.
Also, I feel also if he does that, it takes a lot of pressure off of Kyle Lowry because Lowry can make Lowry's a more versatile player than DeMar DeRozan is because he plays defense. He's a really good rebounder for his size. He can shoot the 3. He can make plays for other players. Like he's like DeMar DeRozan really doesn't give him any help other than the fact that he doesn't have to score that many points. In terms of the all-around game, Lowry always has to defend the better perimeter guy. He's always got to make plays for everybody else. He's always got to come into the offense. Like DeMar DeRozan isn't capable of running an offense. And I think he was drafted in 2009, I believe, with all those other players. So he's going to be coming up on I think this was his 10th season. And, by this point in your career, like, you can't expect to win big if you're not going to make good improvements to your game. Because, like, I'll give an example of a player who was really similar to him, sort of. Like, there was a lot of comparisons drawn between him and Jimmy Butler. And Jimmy Butler went and, he started off defensively, and DeMar DeRozan started offensively. But Jimmy Butler has made all these strides to, he's become a clutch player that you want at the end of the game. He's become a really viable playmaker, averaging close to 6 assists per game a couple times. He's obviously, and he's just, they're similar. And, people, when they're ranking the shooting guards in the NBA, often put those two kind of neck and neck.
Really?
And if you look around, I completely disagree with it because of all the reasons that I've just mentioned. But people really don't view, people have viewed DeMar DeRozan as being a lot better than I personally think he is. And I think it's time kind of to sort of stop overrating him, and understand that he's really not he's a good scorer. Like if you put Donovan Mitchell on Toronto, you'd probably get the same thing.
Or even better, just because
maybe even better because Donovan Mitchell wouldn't be afraid to have the ball. Because Donovan Mitchell actually did a fantastic job having the ball in his hand late in games,
especially in the playoffs.
Yeah, especially in the playoffs. And DeMar DeRozan has an issue with that. Donovan Mitchell doesn't have that issue. And Donovan Mitchell actually averaged 25 points per game in the playoffs this year. So, anytime that you can say that your superstar player could be replaced by a rookie, that's not good.
No, that is really not. And just so I'm not feeling shown up by all the research that you did, I'm really impressed, honestly.
I was kind of, yeah.
Yeah, so Van Vliet, apparently he's a sophomore, so I guess he had a season last year. He played 35 games. And a really interesting stat that I found on their Game 1 performance was apparently the Raptors, they went 0 for 17 in the last 10 minutes of the fourth quarter from literally free feet around the rim.
Yeah,
so
that's pretty awesome.
That's essentially unheard of. The fact that you can't put the ball in the basket for literally 10 minutes of a quarter. And the last 10 minutes of a quarter even. And you're standing right next to the basket. You just can't put it in. That's absurd. And apparently it's the first time that's happened since the 1982 playoffs. I forget what team it was, but yeah, that's insane. And I mean, they could have won the game if you, I don't know, get a dunk or you just make a layup, and they couldn't do it for almost that entire fourth quarter. And that's
and it's not like there's some suffocating defense by Cleveland.
No, absolutely not, and especially in the paint. And that's just unacceptable for them. And it seems like they always had a problem in any of these series with winning the early games, and that always put them in a hole. Obviously, in that one series in the conference finals, they managed to tie it up at 2 games apiece, but just to get to that point, it seemed like it took out all their energy, and then obviously you have to go back to Cleveland, and what are you going to do? So, yeah, I mean, the Raptors are in a horrible position right now. They have to roll back to the same team that they have because, I mean, you can't just trade away your core at this point. That'd be rebuilding, and nobody in Toronto wants them to rebuild. So they're kind of screwed there. They got rid of their coach. I guess they had to do something, but like they're not going to get a better coach.
Yeah, apparently what happened was Masai Ujiri, our guy, I know we both love him.
Yeah.
He berated Dwayne Casey in the locker room after Game 3, sort of blaming him for the loss, I guess.
Ooh.
Which to me is stupid because DeMar DeRozan had 8 points. Like, I love Masai Ujiri, but come on. DeMar DeRozan had 8 points and didn't play in the fourth quarter. And he got, no. Like, that's just not no. But, apparently the first name that they're bringing in to interview is Mike Budenholzer.
That'd be interesting.
In theory, it sounds like a good idea, but at the same time, Mike Budenholzer also coached a 60-win Hawks team that was also swept by LeBron in the conference finals. So I don't think Mike Budenholzer is your guy when you're thinking about getting over LeBron. I feel like you might want to do something different, like maybe get like a Mark Jackson or something.
I mean, I would take him over Dwayne Casey.
I would take Mike Budenholzer over Dwayne Casey too. But I mean, I just feel like in the end result, I don't think would be that different. Like, I don't think Mike Budenholzer is similar to Dwayne Casey in the sense that he's not really like he's an amazing coach, and he's one of those players who he's one of those coaches who gets the most out of players who really aren't that good. Like,
yeah, all those former Spurs coaches do.
Yeah, exactly. Like Jeff Teague, Kyle Korver, Al Horford, and Paul Millsap. That team had 4 All-Stars and won 60 games, and obviously Budenholzer is a huge part of that. But I just feel like he's more of a coach that is kind of gets you to be viable to the point where you can be really good in the regular season, but isn't capable of kind of taking you over the hump and completely changing your system to the point where you can get to a championship level. And that's something I think I was discussing this with a friend of mine the other day. Even though Steve Kerr per se is not really a great coach, and that he's really not he's not a great X's and O's guy. He's not he doesn't run the best plays in the world, and he kind of gets. It's not difficult to outcoach Steve Kerr if you're a good coach. Is basically what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
But he does to a degree. He really did if you think about it, they essentially had the same roster in 2014 and 2015, and then you bring in Steve Kerr. Basically, he made Draymond Green a starter. Steph Curry became an MVP. And they won 16 more games, and they won a championship. They had the same roster. So obviously there was something that he did that kind of to either change the team's mentality or change their play style or do something that kind of unlocked their potential. And even though Steve Kerr, like I just said, I think Mike Budenholzer is more of he's an excellent X's and O's guy. He can really coach the defense. He knows how to run the right play. It's going to be difficult to outcoach him. I think he's one of those guys. But I don't think he's sort of like the Steve Kerr type where he can unlock the potential of the team to become as good as it can possibly be, which is what I think Toronto needs. I think Toronto needs because they won 59 games. They've had all this regular season success. So I think what's next for them is kind of to bring in a coach who can really change the mentality of Kyle Lowry and DeMar DeRozan, similar to how Steve Kerr did with Steph Curry, to where you don't make a huge change in their statistics because in 2014. Under Mark Jackson, Steph Curry averaged 24 points, 9 assists, 4 rebounds on 47% shooting from the field, 42% shooting from 3, and I think 91% from the free throw line. And then his first year with Steve Kerr, his averages were literally almost identical. There was 24 points per game, 8 assists instead of 9, 4 rebounds, just like 4 rebounds the previous year, and then he went up 1% in three-point percentage and up 1% in field goal percentage. He essentially had this identical season. The only difference was rather than winning 51 games under Mark Jackson, they won 67 games under Steve Kerr, and he won MVP. So, I think the Raptors need someone who can sort of do something similar, I guess, for DeMar DeRozan, and then maybe bring in a piece similarly to how Steve Kerr, brought up Draymond Green from the bench and kind of unlocked his full potential as a player. I think they need a coach like that who can really just kind of tap into what their abilities are and just maximize the potential of it rather than having someone who can sort of, coach them better because, at this point for them, it's they can have all the regular season success in the world, but everyone's going to call them fraudulent until they make a run to the conference finals and put up a good fight against LeBron. So I'm not really sure what coaches are out there on the market to get because I mentioned Mark Jackson, but he might sort of be under the same mentality. But the reason that I say that for Mark Jackson is because I feel like he was sort of cut from the Golden State situation a little bit early. I feel like I feel like he deserved one more year because, maybe he could have actually brought that out offensively and maybe he would have started Draymond Green and all that stuff. So I don't know. Maybe you could take a chance on someone like Mark Jackson and sign him to maybe like a 1 or 2 year deal, something like that.
Well, my problem with Mark Jackson is I think he just feeds into some of the Raptors' problems. Like the biggest thing that the Raptors improved on this year in the regular season was their moving the ball around and like actually getting some assists going, and like Kyle Lowry being a real distributor and like passing out of the paint, and like that was a huge thing for them this year. But Mark Jackson, the whole one of the biggest reasons I think he got kicked out of Golden State. I don't know if the owner really cared about this, but like this is probably the biggest difference between him and Steve Kerr, aside from a few lucky breaks, is that Steve Kerr is much more about just getting ball movement around the team, while Mark Jackson is much more of an ISO heavy guy. If you watch like those playoffs with the Warriors, or like the regular season in like 2013, 2014, you're always seeing like Stephen Curry dribbling up the court and like dribbling the ball out of the air out of the ball, or like just you're not seeing a lot of ball movement. And like the biggest problem with the Raptors is when they get ISO heavy and when DeMar DeRozan isn't passing the ball, like he has like a 60% usage percentage as he did in that one game against the Wizards, or it just when there's not enough ball movement going around. Like the biggest thing in the NBA right now is just passing the ball, frankly, as much as you can, and like that's the big thing that Greg Popovich has changed in the NBA is just getting as many assists going as you can, so that like if someone is open, they can take advantage of it. Because it's just a probability game ultimately. If one person is holding onto the ball, then you're completely reliant on that one person to get the shot. But like, if you're always passing the ball around, then everyone who touches the ball has the potential to get a shot, and ultimately the defense has to falter at some point. So that's ultimately a better system. So that could be a potential hangup on Mark Jackson. So
I agree with that. I just feel like in terms of like, I feel like he probably understands. Like, I doubt that he wanted to be let go from such a good situation. So I feel like that might change his approach. Like,
well, yeah, I think it definitely will, like, to some extent.
But the one thing about Mark Jackson, despite how he ran offenses, like I feel like what he could do kind of is sort of the reverse of what Steve Kerr did with him. Like, he could probably go into Toronto and just improve their defense to being like the best defense in the league or the second best defense in the league. And because he's an amazing defensive coach. That's how he made the Warriors such a good defensive team, And because like what Steve Kerr did was Steve Kerr went in with Mark Jackson's team, and he kept their defensive mentality and just changed their offense. What Mark Jackson could do is go into this Dwayne Casey system and keep the whole, how they changed their ball movement to be a top 5 offense, and just work really hard to improve their defense, and just not change the play style to where DeMar DeRozan and Kyle Lowry are running ISO heavy, but run them better isolation plays. Because you can still run a play for isolation with down screens and you have off the ball and stuff. I feel like he might excel at that, and that actually might, because I feel like that he would probably be a good coach. Because the thing with Steph Curry is really not like an isolation player per se, which is I feel like part of the issue, the reason why that didn't really work as well with him. But DeMar DeRozan, who is an isolation player, I think might be able to benefit from having a coach who can understand that there can be times where you can viably run a play through an isolation. And obviously I'm not saying that he should go in there and just completely change their offense to what he would do, but I just feel like he might be willing to make a change, seeing as he got, booted from Golden State probably earlier than he would have liked. But, just someone to consider, obviously, because like I just said, I'm not sure who's out there. There's Becky Hammond is out there.
Yeah, I was just about to mention, like that. I think that would be very interesting.
Be a really good idea, actually, because one, it'd be cool to, first female coaches in Canada. I think that'd be cool.
Yeah, like just knock that one out.
Also, she's from the Spurs, man.
Like she's her Spurs coach, and like it seems like what these teams that are looking for coaches right now need is just someone that they don't know what they're going to get, because like the people that they know what they're getting from, they don't like it. Or even bringing back someone like Larry Brown. I mean, he's getting old, but like he always knew what to do with his NBA teams, and I doubt he likes being at SMU, so that could be really interesting to see.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, that's a lot of talk about a team that really does not have a lot of potential in the next coming seasons. I mean, unless if they can get it turned around next season, that'd be amazing. They're always a team that I'm rooting for, just because they haven't had a lot of.
Oh yeah, real quick before we move on, actually, I saw this earlier today. There was a trade proposal, or it wasn't like a legitimate trade proposal, but there was just someone was suggesting online, was that you could trade DeMar DeRozan for Andrew Wiggins.
That's gonna help.
It's literally going to be the exact same thing.
It's going to be worse. Oh my gosh!
Because Andrew Wiggins is a little bit worse of a score, I believe. I think the main idea of it was kind of just to get the stench of DeMar DeRozan's failures kind of out of the situation. Which I mean, at this point, I feel like it's kind of fair, but I mean, also because if the Raptors are trying to do like a rebuilding thing, then I guess you'd have Andrew Wiggins as a piece to build for the future rather than having to stick on to DeMar. And then you could probably trade Kyle Lowry for some draft picks, and then you could just go into tank mode. But yeah,
I mean, it's not helping the situation.
I'm sure like a team like, I don't know, like New York always wants point guards past their prime, so could probably trade Kyle Lowry there or something like that. But it wouldn't help the situation. But I mean, I mean, you never know. Masai Ujiri is such a good manager and president that I don't think he would let something like that happen. And he openly said we're not going to tank and we're not going to start losing. So I guess they're just going to try and find a different solution.
Yeah, well, we'll definitely be curious to see because the Raptors are always a team that I root for because they just haven't had postseason success. And like on my big spreadsheet of like, hey, what team are you going to root for, Ryan? They're always like in the bottom five for like bottom five. I mean, like I for some reason sorted by the teams that have the most success. So really the top five for like teams that I'm always rooting for in the playoffs. So if they can get it turned around, I would be super happy about that because they're always a team that I'm rooting for, and I'm always disappointed by them, unfortunately.
Yep, that is for sure.
Okay, well, that's a very long-winded way to say you're screwed, Raptors. I say goodbye to the playoffs, and yeah, we wish you well. All right, so that wraps up that Eastern Conference series. Do you want to wrap up the other Eastern Conference series, or go on to the another Western one so that we can like balance it out?
We can just go finish the East first.
Yeah, okay. So that sets us up for the Celtics 76ers series. So within this one, we thought that it was going to be a lot more competitive, which individually the games were, but the overall series isn't. Like it's always hard to call a 5-game series super competitive. And like the 76ers, they were a great team in the first round. They really ran through the Heat, a team that we thought was going to give them a lot more problems on with their D. So that was super disappointing. And yeah, like it seemed like they had a ton of promise, but they just couldn't build on it. Embiid, he was okay, but like he wasn't doing that great. And Ben Simmons, obviously, he had a couple good games, but then he also didn't. And like that's the problem with one-dimensional players. If you have a really good coach like Brad Stevens, you just say, okay, here's the one thing we have to stop him from doing, and if he's just going to be a good passer, well, then we know we don't have to worry about his scoring. So like you just scheme around that, but really, I think this was just more feathers in the cap of Brad Stevens for why he should have either gotten Coach of the Year or just should be getting a lot more recognition instead of being one of those guys like Greg Popovich, where it's just like, oh, well, he's a good coach. He's supposed to be good.
Definitely. I mean, this series was weird because like I don't know what it is, but like because I remember when we did the playoff predictions prior, like I was high on Boston because of Brad Stevens, but I really didn't think that he would be able to do some crazy stuff like this. Like I mean, Ben Simmons scored 1 point in Game 2.
Yep.
One. Like how?
As in like a foul shot. Like he didn't even get a field goal.
He's a horrible free throw shooter, so it very well could have been 0. And it's not like I get, some Sixers fans are probably, oh, he just had an off. Like, no, an off night is not 1 point.
No, that's like 15 points like LeBron. But no, if you get 1 point,
an off night is like when you're making when you shoot like 15 shots and you make like 6 or something or 5, like whatever. He was just shut down. Like, I don't know, like Brad Stevens just made it such that he completely, exposed Ben Simmons' lack of ability to shoot a jump shot. He sealed off everything from within 5 feet. Like, I don't know. I was kind of speechless watching because the first game, like, I wasn't really that, like, I didn't think anything of it after I watched the first game. And then, like, because I was like, oh, whatever, like, game 1's, who cares? Then it gets to game 2, and then, like, I'm watching it, and it's like, oh my God, like, Brad Stevens is really out there shutting down Ben Simmons, like, from the sideline. And then it's like, then you just watch what they're doing, and it's like, basically what they're doing is, like, they're not allowing them to get off. They're not allowing them to get off threes because they're a live and die by the 3 team.
Yeah.
And they're sealing Ben Simmons to playing in the mid range and from beyond the 3-point line. They're basically not letting him within the paint or around the lane, or they're contesting him basically they're leaving everything that's not like 7 feet from the basket open for him, and he's just unable to do anything with it. And then they're sticking to their shooters, and then they're letting Embiid play 1-on-1 against Al Horford, which they couldn't capitalize on that matchup because Al Horford played phenomenally.
Yeah.
So a lot of credit to Al Horford. I think if he had played poorly this series defensively, it would have been a different series. But he used a lot of veteran savvy to kind of disrupt Embiid, and I guess Al Horford has been defending players in the post, I guess, his whole career. So he summoned all that experience and did a great job stopping Joel Embiid, because I think he's a superstar. I think we both view him, Joel Embiid, as being a superstar, but there were some games where he had not superstar games. He had I'm a second year player in the playoffs games, which is exactly what they wanted, and they were able to exploit that really well. But not all credit goes to Brad Stevens. He did a phenomenal job, but Jason Tatum is phenomenal. Jaylen Brown is amazing. Terry Rozier is actually I get it that Brad Stevens is like, he makes players so much better than they are, but obviously, to some degree, it's kind of crazy what Terry Rozier has been doing, because he's playing about just as well as Kyrie Irving would probably.
Yeah.
Probably minus a couple less points, because he's giving you all the rebound. He's giving you more rebounds and assists than Kyrie would, I think. And he obviously plays better defense because he's bigger and he's just a better defender. So who knows? Maybe you can trade Kyrie Irving and get someone and just start Terry Rozier. But that's a discussion for later. And they just did a great job. Because the thing, I think the moment when it changed for me was when I was watching the play. I was watching game 2, and Ben Simmons was bringing the ball up the court, and I think he was on the floor with Robert Covington, Dario Saric, and JJ Redick, and Joel Embiid. And Joel Embiid is trying to get inside position on Al Horford, and he's doing it sort of outside the paint area, so there's not going to be an offensive or defensive 3-second violation. He's doing it kind of to the left side of the basket, on the wooded part of the court, not the painted part of the court. And he's basically Embiid is jostling with Al Horford for position for essentially 15 seconds, right? And the whole time that's happening, Ben Simmons is sort of circling the perimeter, back and forth, kind of dribbling with the ball, looking for something to do. And then the defense kind of starts coming towards him because, the play's about to be over. And he passes it to a shooter, but then there's a Celtics defender on that shooter, so they pass it again to the next shooter, and there's a Celtics defender on that shooter. And then they give it to Embiid down in the post, and by that point, Al Horford has finally established position over him. So Embiid has to chuck up a bad shot, and he hits the backboard and doesn't even hit the rim. And, after I watched the defensive possession, I was like, oh, my God, their defensive schemes are so strong, and they're also solid defensively. They're not coming to help on Ben Simmons because they know that he's not a threat off the dribble. And I was like, that's actually brilliant. That's a brilliant way to expose him, because if you really think about the Celtics offense, they don't have a player who's a threat off the dribble from the perimeter, because Robert Covington's a catch and shoot player, JJ Redick's a catch and shoot player, Dario Saric has become a catch and shoot player because he really can't put the ball on the floor. Joel Embiid can't create plays from the perimeter because he's a big man. And he can, but you can't do it consistently. And then Ben Simmons is not a shooter, and he can't make layups from outside of 7 feet or anything like that. Brad Stevens did a wonderful job exploiting all of the weaknesses of the 76ers. He thoroughly outcoached Brett Brown. And just execution. It was some of the games came down, 3 of the games, in fact. I think it was game 2, game 3, and game 5 all came down to, can the 76ers execute down the stretch to win the game? Because, the Celtics are either having an off night shooting the ball, if their defense hasn't been up to par as it was throughout the series and all that stuff. And just any time that it came down to execution, Boston completely out-executed them. And, obviously that's a coaching error, because I think neither of us are too high on Brett Brown. And, he didn't do a good job, sort of. There were weird situations towards the end of the game where Ben Simmons is shooting free throws, but, why is that the case? And, there's no reason that Ben Simmons should have the ball late in games. And there was an interesting stretch where he tried to play Ben Simmons off the ball with TJ McConnell on the ball. And
oh, wow.
I'm thinking to myself, I get it, but why are you experimenting like this in a playoff game? I feel like you should have tried that at some point before, if you're going to bring me out in the second round of the playoffs. And I don't understand the decision to bench Markelle Fultz prior to the playoffs. He's a good energy piece because he can score around the rim. And he had a triple-double in the regular season. He's a viable player just because he can't shoot a jump shot.
Sorry, I'm going to stop you right here. So I'm actually watching a hockey game in the background, and you're never going to believe what just came up in a commercial. So a
What?
commercial with Charles Barkley in a McDonald's just came up, and like that whole thing in the last postseason where like Charles Barkley was always talking about like the NHL playoffs and being like, "Oh man,
Oh, yeah. That's funny.
yeah." So that was
That's
really
pretty
funny.
funny.
Yeah, sorry
That's
about
funny.
that.
Oh yeah, no problem. But yeah. Brett Brown had some suspect coaching decisions, but overall, I was really glad the Celtics won the series because I thought that it would make for an easier time for LeBron. But if Game One is any indication, that's not the case. But we'll see. So it was an exciting series to watch, though. I remember I watched, I think Game Two or Game Three went to overtime. Game three went to overtime in Philadelphia, and yeah, the Celtics ended up. They really gutted out that they went out and they took that one. Like they had no reason to win that game. Philadelphia had all the momentum because they hit a shot at the buzzer to send it to overtime with Marco Bellinelli shooting some weird faded three that he was a couple feet. He was stepping on the 3-point line, but if he was one step further back, that would have been it for the game. And there was someone dropped confetti, which they weren't supposed to,
Nope.
because it was like because they thought it was a 3, so they dropped confetti because they thought they won, but it was a 2, so it tied the game. And there was confetti, so that was funny.
Well, at least they didn't lose. That would have been really bad.
Yeah, and then they did lose.
Yeah, obviously.
So yeah, and then that was great. So and then Game 4, obviously Philadelphia had their gentleman sweep. Your typical gentleman sweep blowout game, like always, and then whatever.
Yeah.
So.
And yeah, this series, it just, we both thought that 76ers were going to be more competitive, and they just weren't. And there's nothing more exciting than watching a defense just completely take an offense out of a game and just watching them helpless like that. Just you describing that play where Embiid is like in the post for like 15 seconds, and then like everyone's just passing around, and the Celtics are everywhere. Like there's nowhere you can go, and then they go back to Embiid, and he still can't get off a shot because Horford's there already, and like that's the kind of basketball I love seeing, and that makes Brad Stevens a really exciting coach for me. So, like, do you feel like Horford was like the biggest factor in keeping Ben Simmons out of the paint and like Embiid locked down, or was it more so the forwards just checking him on the way in?
No, I think Horford was sort of the reason they won the series because he was playing clutch too. Like he was getting the ball on inbounds and difficult situations. He made a game-winning layup, I think. Not a buzzer beater, but it was a layup that essentially sealed the game. And he was literally like exactly what you would want from your veteran. Like he was playing like not like he wasn't playing box score great, but he was playing the right way great. Like he was doing everything right. He was there on every possession. He wasn't turning the ball over. He was drawing important fouls. He was getting clutch steals, getting clutch blocks. He was in the right spots all the right times. He was setting great screens. Like it was a beautiful series to watch from him. Just as as a if you enjoy less gaudy basketball, like it was a great series for him to watch. And I mean, I would have given him the game ball after every game just because of like he was working really hard to bother Embiid, and he did a great job. I didn't realize how strong he was, but like there were some plays because like Embiid is huge. There were some plays where he was literally just sticking his forearms out and was like, "No, you are not going to pack me in."
Yeah,
and it was great. And he did a great job. Like he disrupted basically anything Ben Simmons wanted in the paint, but. Also Jaylen Brown did a really good job sealing him off on some plays. Jason Tatum, I think the best rookie defender from this draft class, aside from Josh Jackson, who's obviously in Phoenix, so we never get to see him.
Mm-hmm.
But Jason Tatum did an excellent job with his matchups, and Terry Rozier also did a really good job when he was off the ball and chasing JJ Redick around. He made life tough for him. So, it was a great collective effort, but the MVP of the defense definitely was Al Horford anchoring it down. Because if it was a thing where it was like, okay, we just dump it down to Embiid, he's going to get 30, then obviously that opens up the game for everyone else. So the fact that Al Horford was able to limit that as much as he could, holding him, I think, to as few as 14 points in one of the games, that's actually really impressive because, 14 for Embiid, given all that he can do offensively, is actually, that's really good. Because he's one of those players who's capable of going for 30 basically any night because of all of his, post ability and his ability to shoot. But yeah, he wasn't able to do all those post moves that he'd been doing, and Al Horford put him in a lot of uncomfortable situations where he had to kind of because like if he had moved his pivot foot again, it would be a travel basically. So he got him stuck in a lot of situations where he had to pass the ball out of the post, and because Celtics defenders were on all shooters at all times, those often resulted in turnovers because he wasn't able to find a shooter or anyone to pass it to, because nobody was open and all the passing lanes were pretty clogged. So yeah, defensively it was a great series from this. They only had the one game where they had a blowout loss, but that happens in almost all series, especially after you're up 3-0. You can get a little bit complacent for one game. So yeah, I mean, Brad Stevens deserves all the credit in the world. He did a fantastic job. He did a great job coaching them, and then offensively, I think Jaylen Brown had a very good series. Honestly, they all did. I don't think anyone went for 30 on the Celtics. They remind me of sort of in 2015 when the Atlanta Hawks won 60 games. Only one player throughout that entire season had a 30-point game. They just played so well collectively. They had nobody averaging more than 17 points per game, and that was Paul Millsap. He had one 31-point game all season, and that was the highest scoring game from any player that season on that team. And the Celtics remind me a lot of that. They don't have anybody who's sort of like that's our go-to offensive option. It's like Terry Rozier takes a turn, Jason Tatum takes a turn, Al Horford takes a turn down low, and Marcus Morris actually is really good all of a sudden.
Yay!
Yeah, we like Marcus Morris. He's definitely the better Morris twin. And, it was funny because they were showing Markieff in the crowd, and you really can't tell any difference because Markieff was wearing a Celtics jersey in support of their brother, and, they look exactly the same. So people were like, why is Marcus Morris in the crowd? But Marcus Morris was in the game, and it was actually Markieff. But anyways, yeah, Marcus Morris played really good defense. He was making weird threes all of a sudden like he really does. And, yeah, all this it was a good series from the Celtics overall. And, Marcus Morris was taking turns making plays, and everyone was sharing the ball really well. It was kind of like watching a more rugged Golden State almost, with less three-point shooting and less, flashiness, essentially, just in terms of how they were moving the ball, how they were staying structured defensively and all that. It was really good. They maintained their poise, their composure throughout the series, and they played like a veteran team, which was really, really impressive.
Oh, that's an interesting comparison. And a comparison I was going to make is just from watching some of the highlights from the series. It felt like the Celtics' defense resembled not the Pelicans. What I was going to say that the Trailblazers from the regular season. So I was curious to see what you thought of that comparison.
I'm sorry, say that again.
So, did you feel like the Celtics' defense in that series resembled the Trailblazers from the regular season at all, and in terms of all the switching that would happen and just the collapsing into the paint, whenever someone would drive on them?
Not exactly. I think it was more the thing that stuck out to me was that all defenders had a crazy amount of trust in Al Horford. It was they never collapsed into they never came in off a good 3-point shooter basically. Because they knew that Embiid is a wary enough player. He's a conscious enough player where he would pass it to the open shooter. But they just were not allowing that to happen, which I think is what gave them so much trouble. Because they would step in a couple feet, but they would turn around such that they still know where they're they can intercept a pass if a pass is coming, but they kind of stand sideways to where they have one hand on the guy on the 3-point line and then have one hand to kind of block the passing lane, kind of. So that was more what I saw. I didn't really see much collapsing into the paint, but I saw brilliant composure in terms of staying on the 3-point line and not giving up threes. Because when the 76ers can't make threes, they have a hard time winning games, which is I guess that was a focal point for Brad Stevens. I bet if I were to guess, I think his 3 agenda points, for the defense were probably don't let Brad Simmons create a shot in the lane, let Embiid go one-on-one, and just stay on 3-point shooters. And that's basically what they did, and they stuck with the game plan basically the entire series.
Yeah, fair enough. I'm basing that off of 2 minutes of highlight videos I watched before I started this recording, so not really sure. I'm kind of speaking out of my butt on that one, but oh well. So yeah, the Celtics, they had a really impressive series against the 76ers, and I know we both really look forward to seeing the potential of the 76ers be realized in the next couple of years, because they have a lot of promising players, a really promising bench, one of the best centers in the league, and a forward that frankly has a lot of comparisons to LeBron James right now. So that's going to be fascinating to see. So since we do this for every team, I suppose we should get into what the 76ers really need to do in the NBA offseason to improve. The biggest thing for me is try and get LeBron James.
Shit.
I mean, is there really anything else they have to do aside from just hope for more improvement in the regular season next year?
Well, I mean, I think they should focus on just acquiring one more piece, whether that's Paul George, Kawhi Leonard, or um, LeBron. And I'm not sure if they can make it work to bring in. I mean, actually, because JJ Redick is $18 million on the payroll that they're not going to have to worry about because he's a free agent. So maybe if Paul George, you can convince Paul George to take less money or something. Then maybe you could sign him for a 1-and-1 deal where he has a 1-year deal and a player option for not that much money, and then whatever. I just think that they should work out a situation to bring in as much talent as they can, because the thing with the 76ers is that this is their only opportunity to sort of capitalize on what they have, because after next year, like after the 2018-2019 season, Joel Embiid's contract extension is going to kick in. And when that happens, they're going to be owing him a lot of money, so they're not going to have enough room to sign more players, because obviously they're going to want to give Ben Simmons the max as well. So, I think that because Ben Simmons was drafted in 2016, so this was his second season under contract. So I believe after next season, they'll be able to offer him an extension as well. So they're going to have a lot of money to pay. So this would be the only summer that they can really capitalize on getting a superstar free agent. And I think that you should, in my opinion, you should always capitalize on that instead of because, if you have LeBron James, obviously your chances of winning a championship skyrocket. So I think that they should capitalize on. I think they should make it a focal point to try and get LeBron, because the thing with it is, even as LeBron declines with the 76ers, he can probably lead them to a championship. He could probably lead them to maybe 1 or 2 championships as the team's best player. And then as he declines and, he becomes closer, he regresses sort of to being like, I guess, a 20-point per game scorer or whatever it may be. He can become the third option behind Ben Simmons and Embiid. He can be kind of like a Magic Kareem kind of thing, I guess, or not Magic and Kareem per se, but like just a situation kind of like David Robinson and Tim Duncan, where you kind of show them the path to how to win, that kind of thing. Yeah. So I think they should capitalize on getting LeBron. But I hope they get a different coach too, because I don't think LeBron is really going to be I don't think he's going to be too excited about getting coached by Brett Brown. I don't think Brett Brown is very. It's weird because he did a good job, so it's kind of hard to say that he's a bad coach, because he's not really a bad coach, but he's just not. I just feel like he's it's not difficult to outcoach him, basically. I think all the other top coaches who are like Mike D'Antoni, Steve Kerr, Brad Stevens, whoever Toronto, if Toronto hires Mike Budenholzer, if San Antonio gets it together and makes a run, whatever it may be, all those coaches, Greg Popovich, Steve Kerr, Mike D'Antoni, Brad Stevens, all those coaches, Eric Spoelstra, even all those players are going to have it. All those coaches are going to have an advantage over Brett Brown, because Brett Brown is really not that difficult to outcoach. I don't think that he's a coach who makes adjustments. I feel like he kind of just likes to run with what he believes in. I think he's probably got too much of the trust the process stuck in his head.
Yeah.
He doesn't really adapt much, and I think that should change. It's a shame, because maybe they could have brought in Fizdale to Philly, and then that would probably be the icing on the cake for LeBron. But obviously he's in New York now. I'm not really sure who they could bring in Philly, but I don't know. Maybe you could stick with Brett Brown for at least 1 year and just see where it goes, or halfway through the season, if you're not where you want to be, then maybe you could fire him at the midway point and bring someone else in, or whatever it may be. But whoever it is, they could even ask LeBron, because LeBron might want to bring in one of his guys, and I think that you should be willing to do that for him, because if he goes there next year, then they're going to be neck and neck with Golden State to be the favorites to win the championship, and then obviously Golden State will be facing one more year of complacency and tiredness, and it's going to be difficult for them to make a 5th straight finals next year, assuming they make it this year. So I personally believe they should go all in on signing LeBron. I think they should just offer him the max and just talk to him about hey, dude, Ben Simmons loves you. You guys are the same agent. Joel Embiid is a monster. You've never played with young generational talent like this. These are going to be, probably by the end of their careers, these are going to be the 2 best players that you've ever played with. I think they should go all in on signing LeBron.
Yeah.
And if you can't get LeBron, then you got to try and at least get Paul George, or make a trade for Kawhi Leonard without giving up Ben Simmons or Joel Embiid, because Kawhi Leonard would be fantastic next to those guys. He'd give them, a wing defender threat, and then Paul George would do the same thing while also giving you elite 3-point shooting. Both of them would do that. I just think Paul George would be more for a catch and shoot kind of thing, whereas Kawhi Leonard would be kind of more for an extra ball handler if you need one.
Yeah, or even do a trade for one of your old bench pieces that had a really good year. Because someone like Ersan Ilyasova, he's not going to be this good next year. he's obviously getting older, and like a lot of the players on their bench, aside from someone like Covington, who started a lot of games, yeah, but he also came off the bench a bunch. Like just they're getting a lot older, and like if you can take advantage of the good seasons that they had and trade them away for like a piece or two, that's always really helpful. Especially if you can get like a young piece, maybe even at like the point guard position. So if Ben Simmons isn't having a good game, you can just defer to another player and get some good passing out of him. Because as you mentioned, or like 20 minutes ago or so, like if Ben Simmons isn't having a good game, then like there just isn't a lot of players that can really throw the ball around, like space out the court, and like just get make plays off the dribble. Like they just have a lot of catch and shoot talent, and then players that can throw the ball into Embiid. So like that's really important. They can get some more assists coming out of the point guard position. But aside from that, yeah, like they are just a really promising team, and it seems like they have a lot of really good potential. But nevertheless, we say goodbye to you 76ers, and we look forward to seeing the best franchise in NBA history getting back to their winning ways. All right, so that's the 76ers Celtics series. So I suppose we should move on to the Western Conference then, unless there's some other conference I don't know about. So, okay, that leaves us with the Rockets Jazz series and the Warriors Pelicans series. So, I guess we should knock out the more boring one first. So, we have the Warriors Pelicans series. So, within this one, it really wasn't competitive. Like the one game that the Pelicans won in game two. Yeah, that's impressive because you went. Wait, they didn't win game two, they won game three.
Game three.
Yeah, my bad. I was about to make a point about them winning on the Warriors home court, but obviously that didn't happen. So, yeah, like I mean, that's good if you win your game three, but as we mentioned earlier, that's a stereotypical 5 game series. You lose 2 games on the opponent's home court, and then you get one at home, and you're like, ooh, I'm feeling good about myself, and then you lose the next game, and then you have to go back to the opponent's home court, and you lose the series in a gentleman's sweep. So, like, they really weren't competitive throughout. Anthony Davis wasn't doing much to keep players out of the paint. Kevin Durant, he's been doing great. Stephen Curry, when he came back, he looked like his old self, which we said was a huge thing for them. So that's going to be really important in the upcoming Rockets series. But yeah, like it just seemed like the stuff that the Pelicans got to work really well against the Trailblazers, it just did not happen that way in this series. And there was actually competent perimeter players going against them, so they actually had to worry about Freeze. And Drew Holiday, he just wasn't the same on defense. Like he wasn't bad on defense, but I mean, when you're facing the Warriors, there's only so much you can do. And then it just Rondo, Rondo was pretty good, but so yeah, good on him. He's playoff Rondo's a thing apparently, but yeah, like it seemed like they didn't have enough talent to keep up with the Warriors, and that's a big problem for a lot of teams lately.
See, here's the thing. Here's what I found the most interesting when watching this series. I think that it's so odd how ever since DeMarcus Cousins has been injured, they haven't needed DeMarcus Cousins. But in a series where they would have loved to have DeMarcus Cousins, wasn't there? This would have been the best series to have DeMarcus Cousins because
this is the one I was looking forward to him for.
Exactly, because here's the thing. Drew Holiday is a fantastic defender, but he is 6'4". Kevin Durant is 7 feet tall. You cannot have your primary defensive matchup for Kevin Durant be Drew Holiday because he's just shooting over a chair. Like he can see, like it doesn't even obstruct his field of vision to be defended by Drew Holiday because he's so much taller than him, and it's not even because Kevin Durant's not like a post-up player, so it's like if he was, then Drew Holiday's strength would be a factor. But how strong he is really wasn't a factor in defending him because it's just shooting over him the whole time. And what I would have loved to here's the thing, Anthony Davis is the ideal person to defend Kevin Durant, right, from inside the arc at least, and because he's athletic, he's tall, he's laterally mobile enough to keep up with him, he's all that stuff. So ideally you would have wanted Anthony Davis guarding Kevin Durant, right? But the reason that they couldn't do that, right, was, I mean, this is understandable. Like, I understand why Alvin Gentry chose not to assign this because basically guarding Kevin Durant for the whole game is basically going to expend almost all of your energy, right? Like, yeah, he could probably do a really good job defending Kevin Durant, but he'd probably be able to, only score probably somewhere between 15 and 20 points if he has to defend KD the whole night. So the reason that I think this would have been a fantastic series to have DeMarcus Cousins is because you can have AD solidly defend Kevin Durant while also giving you somewhere like close to 20 points, and then you can just make DeMarcus Cousins your primary inside scorer, like you would with Anthony Davis, because then DeMarcus Cousins can go and get you close to 30 points because he's an amazing scorer. 28 points per game, whatever it is, and then all the while you wouldn't have Drew Holiday having to expend all of his energy guarding Kevin Durant, which would make him a really good threat on Steph Curry, which is where you would want him. And then you'd have Drew Holiday offensively, and then you'd basically be able to run this Drew Holiday, DeMarcus Cousins thing on offense. Whereas rather than having that luxury, what you had to do was instead put Drew Holiday, your best perimeter player, guarding their best perimeter player, Kevin Durant, having to expend all of his energy there. So he essentially becomes a non-factor on offense. And then you kind of have just Rondo and Anthony Davis, which is limited by their lack of ability to shoot threes, and Rondo's, I guess, just lack of ability to score in general. So, I think this would have been a brilliant series to have DeMarcus Cousins. It's a real shame that he was injured for this one. I was hoping that he would just get some magical knee transplant in the middle of the night and show up for Game 1. Obviously, it didn't happen.
Yeah.
It's the one thing that I will say, though, I don't think that the Pelicans should really I don't think they should have any hasty off-season decisions. I think they should just come back with this same unit, fully healthy, and just try and pick up more versatile wings, kind of like how Houston did with the additions of Luke Mbah, Mute, PJ Tucker. I think you just want more two-way wings who can shoot the ball because, this Pelicans roster is really – they have better players now, but you need to upgrade. Their wing core is horrendous. Like, Solomon Hill cannot be playing huge minutes in the playoffs. Not going to work. And whoever else is on the roster because, Nikola Mirotic is now a viable six-man, or I guess whatever you want to make him, or if you even want to – the thing with him is I guess you're going to have to make him a six-man because I don't think you can play Rondo, Holiday, Mirotic, Boogie, and Anthony Davis.
Yeah, too big.
Have Mirotic off the bench. But the thing is when you bring – and that's good. He's a really good six-man to have. Like, he's a great option to be your six-man. But you're going to need to have people with him. Like, you're going to need to have a viable wing. So here's what if I'm them, what I do is I bring in a good backup point guard. Not some great player, but a Raymond Felton caliber player or whatever. Then you bring in a good wing, and it doesn't have to be a superstar wing. It can be a 13, 14 points per game scorer who can shoot the three and play good defense. Maybe CJ Miles or something like that. A player similar to him. And then I would bring in also a backup wing so that, you can have a good, just essentially just another body to when you need more defenders on the floor, another player similar to CJ Miles. I'm really not sure who's maybe a Courtney Lee type player. I'm not sure who's on the market this year. I'm just kind of giving comparisons of the players that I would like to see on their roster. I just think that they need more 3-and-D guys because I know that I think it was a couple podcasts ago I went on this tangent about how DeMarcus Cousins, they have to consider re-signing him and then maybe trading him or whatever maybe. But I still think they should do that. But at the same time, DeMarcus Cousins is such he's such a important matchup when you're facing Golden State. So I don't know. Maybe they do choose to figure something out with him. But if they choose to do that, they are going to need much more depth because their bench is atrocious. They have no bench, and they need some help there. And obviously you're also going to need a viable backup big man, just to when you sit your stars. So I think that New Orleans shouldn't make any coaching changes. They shouldn't make any drastic playbook changes. They really just need to make additions to the roster. There's nobody that they need to get rid of per se, I don't think. They just really need to surround Anthony Davis with more help because I really feel like in the right situations he can definitely be a superstar player. I think he's definitely capable of winning a playoff series just when he's not basically playing 2-on-5, which is unfortunately what he had to do this series, in my opinion. Because Mirotic didn't have as good, and Draymond Green actually did a really good job on Anthony Davis. So I think, if you have DeMarcus Cousins, obviously, then Draymond Green is going to have to pick his poison as to which one he's going to guard. And then obviously if you can do like a little 4 or 5 elbow pick and roll, and then you have you can switch Draymond onto DeMarcus, and he's probably going to be less effective on DeMarcus because DeMarcus is taller and bigger. And then, whatever. Like, I just think that they need to kind of explore what they can do with this roster because talent-wise, this is one of the best rosters in the league. Drew Holiday, DeMarcus Cousins, Anthony Davis, Rajon Rondo are all great players. They just kind of need depth at this point to kind of take them to the next level. But I think Alvin Gentry can stay. I think he has a really good relationship with Anthony Davis. And he's a Steve Kerr assistant, so obviously that helps when you're playing against the Warriors. So I think that they just kind of need to go in with the mentality of deafening their wings, and just maybe finding a decent backup point guard, because like their bench players are just no names. Like it's like Jordan Crawford and like I honestly I don't even know who's on New Orleans roster. So
Yeah. Here, how about this? So I actually just thought about this as a solution to the problem that the Pelicans were having with their obviously not having enough shooting from the wing. What if okay, so let me make sure I agree with this. Okay, so what if they did a trade with the Jazz where they gave the Jazz Rajon Rondo, in exchange they got Dante Exum and Raul Neto. What would you think about that trade?
what is it? Which player?
Uh, so it's Rajon Rondo for Dante Exum and Raul Neto.
Well, here's why I would choose not to do that trade, but it's really not because of my revere for Rajon Rondo or anything. It's really just I don't trust Dante Exum's health at all. He's so shaky in terms of I think he was drafted in 2014, and I think he's only played like 30 something games. I just wouldn't trust him next to Anthony, and like giving away Rajon Rondo, who is he's such a good playmaker. Like even though he's not like he has flaws in his game definitely, but I think that he has a really good relationship with Drew Holiday and Anthony Davis and DeMarcus Cousins for that matter, because they were teammates on the Kings when Rajon Rondo led the league in assists.
Yeah,
and yeah, I don't think that I wouldn't do it because I mean Raul Neto is not really that good of a player, and Dante Exum really hasn't shown that much potential two-way yet. He's a good defensive player because he's tall and long, but his health and his lack of offensive game and his lack of ability to make plays for others are what would defer me from that trade. I just think Rondo is still at this point, even at this point in his career, is a top 5 playmaker in the league, and I don't think you're going to be able to find anybody else with that sort of creativity to pass the ball and that ability to step up in the playoffs, because he really is a different player in the playoffs. He plays much better, and like you just said, he plays really well against the better teams as well. He did a great job against the Warriors. It was just they were really just outnumbered. So I would keep Rajon Rondo. I think it's a good fit for him, and I think it's a beautiful thing to be able to watch him play off with good big men, because obviously we all remember how well he played with Kevin Garnett. It's just I think Rondo's game would become even better if he's playing with shooters. Kind of if you put him in a similar situation to how it was in Boston when he had Ray Allen and Paul Pierce able to shoot, and Kevin Garnett as a big down low. They just need to get him some shooters, and then I think that Rondo will be a perfect fit along with them. He's that veteran point guard who keeps his composure and doesn't he doesn't go crazy aside from that one time in Dallas. But I would keep Rajon Rondo. I wouldn't bank on Dante Exum because of his health, and Raul Nedo's neither of them are overly talented offensively.
yeah, fair enough. I think that was honestly me trying to find a way to get the Jazz that backup point guard that they desperately need, as we saw.
Oh, you just want Rondo on the Jazz? That
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, like it seems like the Pelicans have a lot of potential, especially if they can get DeMarcus Cousins in free agency, which I think we both agree is definitely something that should happen. Like if you can get talent, you should always just try and get talent, even if you want to do a sign and trade, which frankly I don't think they should do, because one of the big problems in this series, and even if you want to say the Trailblazers series, despite them doing fantastic against them, obviously was just Anthony Davis had to be parked in the paint the entire time because that's what happens when like you don't have another viable big on defense, and you have your 4-man Nikola Mirotic lined up on the perimeter so often, is that somebody has to play in the paint, and that ended up being Anthony Davis a lot, and that in a lot of ways limits what he can do when you have such a good 3-point shooter. And when they had DeMarcus Cousins, the biggest thing that they did was they just put DeMarcus Cousins right in the center, and he would just stand in the paint and sometimes move around a little bit, but most of the time just standing there and making sure that anytime anyone drove, he gave them average defense according to, I forget what stat it was exactly, but I don't know, whatever it was some advanced metric. And then Anthony Davis would just move around the court, and he would go catch whatever power forward was doing well. He would really lock up any player, because I mean he's such a good defender that he can just do that for anybody. And I heard a stat on the lab where they were mentioning how big of a drop in defense that the Pelicans experienced when DeMarcus Cousins went down, and a lot of that was attributed to Anthony Davis's drop in defensive performance, having to stay in the paint the entire time instead of getting to move around and follow the best players on the court. because obviously if you don't have a really good center on defense aside from him, then like his niche is pretty clear. So that was a shame for him. But yeah, like if you can get DeMarcus Cousins back, I'd be fascinated to see it because like one of the only reasons I was excited to see it, I was like, ooh, this might be something that's going to cause the Warriors trouble because like it's just something different, and it's like, ooh, you don't see every time like a team where there's basically two centers on the court at once, and like they both are really comfortable handling the ball. And I know I watched a bunch of Pelicans games this year, and by a bunch I mean like a bunch for me, so like 3 or 4 games, but that was always super exciting to watch. And like just seeing like DeMarcus Cousins moving the ball up the court and like just seeing it 2 7-foot players that are that comfortable handling the offense and like that just competent on defense. It's really exciting. So definitely bring it back. And like even if you want to bring him back just so you can do like sign and trading, get like 2 first-round picks or something, that'd be great as well. But I don't think that's happening because nobody trusts his injuries after his injury resistance at this point, just because obviously it's an Achilles injury, and we've talked about many times how how hard it is to rebound from those.
Definitely. I mean, I think I would bring him back and just try it out, and then if it doesn't work out, then I mean you can trade him like 20 games in the season in like December or something, whatever it may be. But I mean you can try to at least, because I'm sure there are some desperate teams that would take him even if he's only averaging like 20 and 10 as opposed to his usual 25 and 13 or whatever it is. But I mean, because I'm sure dumb teams like Phoenix or New York will probably take it. So
yeah.
I mean, I like DeMarcus Cousins. I just think that he just kind of needs to mature a little bit as a player in terms of shot selection. He's 270 pounds. He should be playing more inside than shooting 6 threes a game, because Klay Thompson shoots 7, and you're not Klay Thompson. But and he just needs to become more efficient. But other than some off-season work, and I mean, also I don't even know when he's coming back. I'm not sure how long an Achilles, but he might not even be back until probably. Well, do you know? I don't think an Achilles. I don't think he'll.
No, I think it's like 14 months.
Yeah, I don't think. He's not going to be back in time for the start of the season for sure. So
well, let me look at Tyreek Evans' return, because he was the last big player to have an Achilles injury before him, Wesley Johnson. But I'm looking at Tyreek Evans.
Oh yeah, actually, okay. Also, I don't know if Tyreek Evans is a free agent, but he would be perfect in New Orleans.
Oh yeah, that's an excellent point. Yeah, because
he was there, and then they traded him, or he left. I don't know.
And then he got it together.
He had a bounce back year this year. He averaged like 25 and 5, I think.
Yeah, maybe
he shot 43% from 3. He would actually be brilliant in New Orleans now. It's a shame that he just left there, because he probably won't want to come back, I guess. But he's brilliant. He's great now. I remember I really wanted him to go to Cleveland at the trade deadline, but then there were rumors that Boston might get him, and that would be really fun because I mean he's really good still. Like, I mean, he showed a lot of potential as a rookie, and then obviously he had all those injuries, but he's really bounced back under the radar because he's been playing in Memphis, and nobody cared about Memphis this season because whatever.
Yeah. I'm really glad I said that on accident, because I realized I meant Rudy Gay, not Tyreek Evans.
Oh, well, anyways, good thing you said Tyreek Evans, because he'd be brilliant in New Orleans. But yeah, Rudy Gay, I think he did come back from an Achilles. I think he tore it last year.
Yeah, so I'm just checking right now to see when he tore it exactly. Let's see, he tore it on the January 18th, and let me check when he came back. That would be, it's loading. He came back on, oh wow, he's back at the beginning of the next season, so that was only 10 months.
Yeah, okay. For DeMarcus, then 10 months, it would still not be in time.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh, wait, did DeMarcus tear his in March or February?
I thought it was February. Wasn't it like 2 or 3 weeks before the All-Star break?
Yeah, because he was replaced. Yeah, you're right. He was replaced. He was replaced in All-Star game. So let me double check.
Yeah, that might have even been January.
When? Yeah, it might have been at the end of January. When did DeMarcus tear his? January 27th.
Okay.
Okay, so he might be able to come back in like November.
Yeah, and I'm sure he'll be fine not getting any of that preseason work, as we've talked about.
Exactly, for sure. So yeah, that about covers that series.
Yeah, and hopefully the Pelicans can continue the upward trend that they've been on. And yeah, Alvin Gentry's been doing a good job with the team. And yeah, I mean, no, Anthony Davis can't have any detractors now or saying he can't win a playoff game. So That's nice, even though that was so stupid.
Exactly.
So yeah, we wish you farewell, Pelicans, and we look forward to seeing you guys fly in next year for another good playoffs. All right,
Yep.
so that moves on to the last series that we're going to be talking about for the second round, that being the Rockets Jazz series. So this was a series that I had high hopes for because I watched Game 2 actually, and it was super exciting because the Jazz actually won and like they looked really confident and like they were reigning freeze and like the Rockets weren't. So that was really exciting, and they even withstood that run that we were talking about in the last one because we were watching the game during that, and like yeah, like obviously they took a big lead on the Rockets. They were up by like 10 or 15 at the half, and then the Rockets stormed back, and like that was super terrifying. And you're like, oh no, the Rockets are going to blow them out of the water, and it's going to be horrible, and they're going to lose by 30, and then they're going to be down 0-2 when the series is over. But no, they held their ground, and they just basically held serve for the rest of the game and ended up winning, and that was really impressive because the Rockets are a very good team, and like uh, that's really good if you can slow the Rockets down like that. And even when they're raining down freeze at the end of the game, well, not raining down like if they're hitting freeze like at a crazy rate, you're not stopping them no matter who you are. But yeah, like if they can just get things going and like the Jazz can get really good production out of their perimeter players. And something interesting that I was reading about was apparently Donovan Mitchell all season, like whenever he always has like a bad first game against teams, but then in the second game that he plays against them, he makes a ton of adjustments, and then he has a really good game against them. So like I was like, okay, is this just going to be a really good series for Donovan Mitchell? Is he going to keep up like the crazy playoff performances that he's having and like just take over this series like a Kobe Bryant player? And no, that didn't really happen, to be honest. Like the Rockets just played up to their potential for the rest of the series, and the Jazz sadly lost. And yeah, I would say if they had Ricky Rubio, this could have been an absolutely fascinating series. So my biggest thing is just get them a backup point guard, so you don't have to worry about Ricky Rubio because he's a player that he has a bit of a prevalent, not a prevalence, I don't know the word for it. He gets injured a lot, so like you got to take precautions against that.
Yeah. Um, I mean, I thought overall, like it was a good series to watch. I feel like because to me, it kind of gets me more excited for the conference finals, simply because it shows that Houston is not fraudulent by any means. Utah, in my opinion, was an excellent team, and the fact that like they were able to, like they made short work of this series, and this series easily could have went some more games. Some people were even thinking if with Rubio, this could have been a really tough 6 or 7.
Yeah,
Which I wouldn't put up because Rubio is. I mean, people might be thinking like, oh my God, Ricky Rubio, no, he wouldn't, but he really would. He had an excellent playoffs this season, and as far as Donovan Mitchell goes, he didn't have as good of a series as he did against OKC or anything, but that's where nobody's expecting that from him. He's a rookie. He had some inefficient games. He had one game where he only had 10 points, but he's a rookie and he was playing. He was playing against the best guard in the league, in my opinion, James Harden, and obviously Chris Paul guarding him a lot of the time, which is going to be difficult because Chris Paul is one, brilliant, and two, he's just brilliant.
yep.
So it was a good series to watch. It was interesting to see how they sort of mitigated Gobert's impact by because one, Harden is much more adept at drawing fouls than anyone on the Thunder would ever dream of being, and I think CP3's mid-range attack really kind of helped prevent Rudy Gobert from having as big of an impact as he did in the OKC series, because obviously with OKC, as we know, because Melo was not utilized very much, Paul George wasn't playing on the elbow, and Russell Westbrook wasn't shooting a lot of pull-up mid-range jump shots. And maybe he did, but whenever he did, he was missing them. So I think what helped a lot to mitigate Rudy Gobert's impact is that Chris Paul became, he was going to the mid-range a lot, and he wasn't settling for threes or layups because, they're good. They're a really good team in defending both threes and layups, but they don't necessarily have a really good, they don't really have an answer for excellent mid-range players. Which is also why I would think that if they had played the Warriors in the second round, then Utah probably would have lost in about 5 games as well, because you'd have Kevin Durant, doing what he does in the mid-range area. So I think the Rockets did a good job game planning. Luckily, they didn't go cold for the whole series. They only had one relatively cold game from three. Or actually, maybe they had more, but regardless, it was a good series from the Rockets to kind of, that they can win lower scoring games because, they had a game where they won 112 to 102, which for them is relatively low scoring, and then 116 to 108, which is high scoring, but not crazy high scoring, like 120s, 130s, like they were getting up to against Minnesota, where they had like the 120 something point game or whatever it was.
Yeah.
But it was a good series for the future of Utah. I guess it kind of showed that because everyone obviously prior to the season was kind of looking at Utah as one of those teams that wasn't going to be any good for the next 10 years. And they said no. Quinn Snyder's a great coach. Rudy Gobert is one of the best defensive players in the league. Donovan Mitchell's probably the second or third best rookie in this draft class. And he's a great scorer. Then you got Joe Ingles, who's probably one of the best three-point shooters in the NBA. And they did all this without their point guard. And a lot of people might not think that that's a big deal because he's, from an external, perspective, Ricky Rubio is really not he's not like some all-star player. But to not have your point guard when he's literally the person running your entire offense, and you literally do not have a backup point guard, like you're going to play this guy. I still don't know his first name, R. O'Neal.
Yeah.
He's in your starting lineup.
I'll look him up. He deserves to have a first name.
Yeah, I'm sure. I know. I don't know what it is. Actually, let's see. Let's see if I can find it.
Yeah.
His name is.
No, not okay. That is not him. Here, let me try Basketball Reference.
His name is Royce. Royce O'Neal.
Royce. Okay, that is not a good first name. Okay.
Yeah, Royce. Okay, Royce O'Neal. When Royce O'Neal he's a small forward, and your starting lineup is a shooting guard, two small forward. It said you're basically this is your lineup, right? Without Ricky Rubio, you have a shooting guard, three small forwards, and Rudy Gobert, who's a center. Because you have Donovan Mitchell, who's shooting guard. You have Jay Crowder, Royce O'Neal, and Joe Ingles, who are all small forwards. And then you have Rudy Gobert. So who the hell is going to make plays for that team? Because Royce O'Neal is not making plays. Jay Crowder is not making plays. Rudy Gobert is not making plays. Joe Ingles is not making plays. And Donovan Mitchell doesn't yet know how to make plays. And then your only other option at point guard is Raul Neto. He's literally the only other point guard on the roster. And he, in the closeout game, had 0 points.
Yeah.
Assists. And yeah, so Utah is once they make some more additions, similarly like how I mentioned with New Orleans, they're going to be a real threat. I think they just kind of need to, because they have a good starting lineup. They have Ricky Rubio, Rudy Gobert, Donovan Mitchell, Jay Crowder, Joe Ingles. That's a pretty viable starting lineup, I would say. Because obviously you've got Jay Crowder, who's your different 3-and-D guy, Joe Ingles, who's your sharpshooter, Donovan Mitchell, who's your perimeter scorer, Ricky Rubio, who's your playmaker, and then Rudy Gobert, who's your big man who can defend and get some easy looks inside. They're in a weird way sort of constructed like the old Clippers, but without the curse. From the standpoint of having sharpshooter, playmaking, and big man who can score inside with good defense. So they're a good team. I think that really all they need to do is, like you said, get a backup point guard and just maybe get some more shooting wings, because obviously having shooting wings is sort of the best thing that you can have in the NBA. Like the Warriors have, like Nick Young and everyone in the world. But yeah, as far as the series itself goes, though, it showed me that the Rockets, like I just said, are not a Raptors type thing where they're going to cave when they're playing a tough team. And it showed that in my mind, I feel like they're kind of looking at their phones and checking ESPN after the game to make sure that they're not losing games worse than the Warriors are, or losing more games than the Warriors or anything like that. And I think that's pretty impressive, given that the Warriors have definitely had probably the easier road to the conference finals. That's just my opinion, because obviously you play the Spurs without Kawhi, who have no offensive option, and then you play New Orleans without DeMarcus Cousins, and you're outnumbering them basically 4-2. Because then you get step back for that series, obviously, and then it doesn't even make it close. Whereas the Rockets kind of had to play the Timberwolves, who had good bench support from Jamal Crawford and Derrick Rose, and then obviously good starter play, bad starter play from Jimmy Butler and Karl Anthony Towns, but they just have more bodies, in terms of having Andrew Wiggins, Derrick Rose, Karl Anthony Towns, Jimmy Butler, Jamal Crawford, all that stuff. I feel like the Wolves probably would have given the Warriors more trouble in the first round than the Spurs did, that's for sure. And then I also think that in the second round, Utah is obviously, in my opinion, a better team than New Orleans, just because they're not reliant on individual players. Sort of like Boston does not reliant on individual players. I feel like Utah's one of those teams, and I think those teams are always more difficult to beat because you don't have to cancel out one thing. You kind of have to change the way that you literally individual players cannot play better than their individual players. It has to be your team ball collectively has to be better than their team ball collectively, which is obviously much more difficult, which is one of the reasons why, with this Cleveland Boston series might not be as over as quickly as we think. So it was good for the Rockets to see that they can actually win in a multitude of ways. They can be that great 3-point scoring team. They can be a slower team. They can be win collectively team. And it was good to see that their whole idea, I guess, last season, when they brought in Chris Paul, at the beginning of the season when they brought in Chris Paul, I feel like their whole idea was to kind of make it such that when Harden has an off night, it's okay because you still have one point guard who's, running an amazing offense with a lot of shooters. And that's been the case so far these playoffs because, when Harden has had an off night, Chris Paul has done a great job commanding the offense. And when CP3 has had an off night, Harden has done a great job commanding the offense. And it was also really good to see in Game 5, Chris Paul had a 41-point game, 41 points, 10 assists, 7 rebounds, his first 40-10 game with no turnovers in playoff history. He had a fantastic game to send them to the conference finals. And his last 2 games, I think he played phenomenally in both Game 4 and 5. So he really didn't want to lose, and it was really good. It's really nice to see him finally get to the conference finals because he's been unfairly criticized for that for a long time. So that was cool. But overall, in terms of the Jazz, Donovan Mitchell's great. He just do whatever, improve as all second-year players are supposed to, get a little better on defense, get a little better at another skill, just get more efficient, whatever he needs to do. He'll probably be a legit scoring superstar, probably by his 4th or 5th year. So, yeah, that's really all I have to say for that series.
Yeah, and the only thing I really have left to say is I've been trying to figure out for really the past week, on and off, just what the Jazz can do to get a backup point guard, because I think that's their biggest concern going into the offseason beyond just, general improvements is getting a backup point guard so they don't end up in a situation where they're screwed if they don't have Ricky Rubio, because as I mentioned to start this discussion, he's not a reliable player in terms of his health, so you just need to be prepared. So is there anybody that you can imagine in the NBA that they could reasonably get that would fix that problem? Because my best answer to that right now is that stupid trade for Rajon Rondo or getting a 39-year-old Jose Calderon, which obviously isn't going to help much.
Yeah, I think if only Jeremy Lin was available.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Yeah, I'm not really sure who else is available in the market. I guess we could think. They could draft one. Drafting one probably wouldn't work out too much because their pick won't be that high this year. So.
Yeah, and that's really unfortunate. But
they might be able to make a trade with a team. Because they're probably let's see. Denver may be willing to give up one of their guards for a or even New York maybe because they're going to have to free up some cap room to get all these free agents that they want that they're not going to get. I don't know. Maybe if Toronto blows it up, they can get Kyle Lowry.
Yeah, that'd be interesting.
He probably wouldn't accept a backup role though. He's still relatively in his prime. Yeah, I really don't know. All the better backup point guards in the league are pretty much taken out. There's Raymond Felton, and he's good, and then there's Tyus Jones, he's good. There's Sean Livingston, he's good. Yeah, unfortunately, I don't know. They probably just have to draft one and hope that they get a steal.
Yeah, maybe do more scouting in Europe.
Actually, I don't know if you heard about this, but Tony Parker apparently is not set on staying in San Antonio.
Oh, that'd be weird.
Yeah, he said that he wants to continue playing. He wants to play 20 years, but he is not sure whether or not he wants to continue in San Antonio. He's not set on it. So maybe he can go to the Jazz. Tony Parker is still a viable option. Or honestly, there's Derrick Rose. I'm not sure how high you are on him, but I definitely think that he's still an impact maker in terms of his scoring, and he can still run an offense. He's not a great assist guy in terms of playmaking, but he can run an offense in terms of getting guys in the right spots and making sure that everyone is where they're supposed to be. I think Tony Parker and Derrick Rose, despite their fading athleticism and all that, they're still really good at doing, and they're obviously still decent inside scorers. Derrick Rose more so than Tony Parker, because Tony Parker's older. But yeah, I think Derrick Rose might actually be a really good addition for Utah if they're willing to, if they're willing to give him a shot. I know they waived him earlier this season. That was probably not the best idea. They should have at least given him a chance, in my opinion.
Yeah,
because he did really well in Minnesota. But I don't know, maybe they'll look at him and maybe they'll see what he did in Minnesota and be like, oh wow, we shouldn't have waived that guy. He's actually pretty motivated. But there's Derrick Rose to consider. There's Tony Parker to consider, I guess, if you actually leave San Antonio, which would be hard to imagine, but you never know. But yeah, I mean, I guess Derrick Rose is the only one who's for sure going to be available. So you might as well, I guess, bring him in for a workout and see what he can do.
Yeah, and just keep scouting Europe and try and find the next best point guard out of there, because just all of these European point guards are fantastic playmakers, so that'd be great to see.
Yeah, like Milos Teodosic on the Clippers, fantastic. He was averaging, I think, like 8 assists before he went down with an injury, and then that brought it down to 5 after he came back.
Yeah, but you mentioned former Spurs players. If they could get someone like Manu Ginobili, which never is going to happen, but like if they could get Manu, that'd be amazing.
Yeah, I mean, Tony Parker, I mean, I've heard some stories about how he's really not the best guy, but I really didn't think that he'd ever leave San Antonio. It's kind of crazy to think about.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe Pop never got over his whole thing with Eva Longoria.
Yeah, yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking of.
Okay, well, that's our discussion of the Jazz, and don't worry, you'll get plenty more on the Rockets, but for now, we bid adieu to the Jazz, and we look forward to the third best team in the West continuing their rise and really never getting over the hump over the Rockets and Warriors. Okay, yeah. I mean, yeah. So, okay, then I guess we can get into our previews for the Western and Eastern Conference Finals. Do you want to start with the Western Conference or the Eastern Conference? Since I know we usually end with LeBron James, but the Western Conference Final has been the series that we've been talking about for like the past couple of months.
Yeah, since the Western Finals are going to be the essentially the NBA Finals, I think we should start with the Cleveland Celtics series.
Yeah, okay. So I guess we'll go down the normal procedure. So for this one, I actually bothered to figure out the real starting lineups. I didn't just do the BS thing with the win shares, because if we had another series where I had Ryan Anderson in the starting lineup, I think everyone would lose their minds. Okay.
Yeah.
So for this series, obviously we were going to go matchup by matchup. So starting at the point guard position for the Cavaliers, I used the something that the lab mentioned was their. Here, let me pull up the exact quote here. So where is that? Yeah. So apparently the Cavs' best lineup in the playoffs, they didn't play a single regular season minute with that lineup, which is absolutely bizarre, because when I tell you what the lineup is, it's not really it's one that you would think they had played with a bunch, and that lineup would be George Hill at the point guard, then J.R. Smith, Kyle Korver, LeBron James, and Kevin Love. And then you can also switch out Jose Calderon for George Hill if you wanted there. It doesn't make any difference. So, yeah, that's going to be what we're going with. So, obviously, that's going to be George Hill versus Terry Rozier at the point guard position.
I'm going to give the advantage to Terry Rozier simply because he's just been playing out of his mind this playoffs. He's really, he's Kyrie Irving level right now. He's been playing clutch, been playing great defense. He's been making plays for others, scoring at the rim, making big threes. Brad Stevens has really turned him into a player that looks like he's going to be a future superstar, even though we all know that if he got traded to Phoenix tomorrow, he'd be averaging 13 points per game and would be awful. But regardless, can't help that. Can't help that he's playing in Boston. You got to give him credit for what he's able to do with the opportunity. So because George Hill really has, in my opinion, still been a relative disappointment since he came to Cleveland, obviously he's been playing better in terms of controlling the offense and, controlling the pace. But, box score wise, he's still really not giving you much of anything. He's still making maybe 1 or 2 shots a game, getting most of his offense at the free throw line. He's, I guess, getting 3 assists is considered facilitating for your teammates. But to me, he's still really not playing all that well. And if they want any chance of winning a championship, he needs to not play this bad. He needs to play how well he was playing in Utah 2 years ago, or last year. And I'm going to give it to Terry Rozier. Just he's got Drew Bledsoe wearing a Scary Terry shirt. So Yeah, Terry Rozier has been fantastic this playoffs. He's been one of the surprises of the playoffs. So I'm going to give it to him just because of his body of work in the playoffs. As far as obviously been much more impressive. He hit the game winner in game one of the playoffs, or not the game winner, but the game tying or the shot to take the lead with 0.5 seconds left in game one against the Bucks. And then he's had a couple more clutch moments, making big baskets. He hit one of the clutch baskets to seal the Sixers series, and he had I think one game where he had like 21 points, nine rebounds, 8 assists. Triple double territory, and it's an authentic triple double rather than a get out the way so I can grab the rebounds triple double, which those are all obviously always still impressive to me. And so Terry Rozier pretty easy for me.
Yeah, me as well. Honestly, I think even if he wasn't on the Celtics, where the point guard position is made pretty easy for the players, I think it still would be Terry Rozier just because George Hill really hasn't been good in the playoffs, and like he was a little better in the Raptors series, but like not really. He still wasn't very good. So yeah, and like that makes it pretty easy. And Terry Rozier, he's nothing special, but like on the Celtics, he's made into something that could be a real threat for the Cavs and something they have to take really seriously. So yeah, almost just out of the team that he's on right now, he's a better option for them. But even if he was on the Suns and they were miraculously in the conference finals and bizarrely facing the Cavs, because I don't know, the Cavs got moved to the Western Conference or something, then yeah, I'd still choose Terry Rozier. So okay.
Yeah, George Hill's been a disappointment.
Yeah. So. Okay. So then at shooting guard, we have Jaylen Brown versus J.R. Smith.
Jaylen Brown. J.R. Smith has been wildly inconsistent this playoffs.
Yes.
It's crazy, really. He's had one 20-point game, one 15-point game, and then the rest have been just 7, 2, 3, 5, 6, 8, 9, 11. Like, he has no rhythm. He's on and off all the time. Either he's making 6 of 8 threes or he's making 1 of 6. Like, it's like, he's no consistency at all. He hasn't been the perimeter defender that he's been in years past. He's really just been lackluster ever since, like, all this entire season. I think his last shining moments were in the 2016 NBA Finals because he was pretty poor all of last season as well. And this season he was pretty awful. So, and then Jaylen Brown, on the other hand, has been fantastic. He's had exactly what you want from your second-year player, getting better at literally everything. He became more efficient, better three-point shooter, better rebounder, better passer, better scorer, better defender. He's literally made all the strides that you would want. And Jaylen Brown is he's probably the third best player in the series. Maybe even second, depending on how you do the toss-up between Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, because they're an amazing young duo. Because Kevin Love has also been a disappointment, but we'll get to that too. And then, Jaylen Brown, I think it's fairly easy here. He literally contributes more in literally everything. I think J.R. Smith is still getting a lot of appreciation, a lot of starting nods for stuff that he's done in the past, but I think it's time to stop all that, live in the present, and realize that he's a washed player who's really not all that good and is just an occasional threat to go off for maybe 25 points. And, that's probably his limit. Don't think it's ever going to give you 30. His max that'll probably give you all playoffs is probably going to be 25, and that's probably going to be in some meaningless game after the finals are basically already decided. So, hopefully you can prove me wrong, but J.R. Smith's been a huge disappointment. Jaylen Brown has been exceeding expectations. So for me, it's definitely Jaylen Brown. And that matchup, I really don't think would be dictated by the team or anything like that. I think regardless of what teams those two are on, I think it's going to be Jaylen Brown all day, every day.
Yeah, and as a coach, you always want to take consistency where you can. Sure, J.R. Smith might knock down like 12 threes in a row or something, or set the NBA record for free-point shooting in a single game. He's done that before, but then again, he also might score 1 point like Ben Simmons. Like, you just can't trust him, really. And though his defense usually picks up in the playoffs, I haven't been paying attention to that much, so it may be okay in these playoffs, but I'll just assume that it hasn't, because, screw J.R. Smith, I guess. So, yeah, that isn't really a point in his favor. For Jaylen Brown, he's just been an awesome role player for the team that's really made up of all role players. He's a good scorer from the shooting guard position. He can knock down threes when you need him. He can drive to the paint when you need one. He's just a really good player, and he's just solid. And Brad Stevens can count on him, and we can count on him to win this matchup. Luckily. So yeah.
Yeah, the trade for Kyrie Irving should have included Jaylen Brown and Terry Rozier. That would have been pretty good,
Yeah.
but unfortunately that did not happen, and we got the light version of that with Isaiah Thomas and Jay Crowder. So
Yeah.
small forward.
Oh yeah, that was something I forgot to mention. Yeah, Jay Crowder was awesome in that Jazz series. He was knocking down a ton of frees, so I don't know what was wrong
Oh
with
yeah,
him.
he did. Yeah, I don't know. Cleveland, he was playing like I don't know what it was. I feel maybe he was just sulking about the fact that he was traded from where he wanted to play, and maybe him and Isaiah had this whole vendetta about, oh my god, like we were gonna beat this team if we were still in Boston. Like why are we here and all this stuff. But yeah, Jay Crowder, he picked it up. Wish he was still in Cleveland because I was expecting way more from him when he was in Cleveland. Like it seems like everybody who's come to Cleveland this year has been a disappointment,
Yeah, he must have been drinking that
including
Cuyahoga water. Yeah, I bet he was drinking that Cuyahoga water or something.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. There's literally been no bright spot on Cleveland the entire year except for LeBron, and that's not an exaggeration.
Yeah, and amazingly, that's been enough for them. So yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so with their small ball lineups, do you know if they put LeBron at the 3 or the 4?
When they play small, they put him at the 4.
Okay, so then we'll do for small forward Kyle Korver versus Jason Tatum. This one seems relatively obvious, even though Kyle Korver did start to heat up a little bit in the Toronto series. Jason Tatum has been awesome, and like if Rookie of the Year voting continued into the playoffs, I think he would have a decent chance of stepping past Donovan Mitchell just in terms of how much better his defense has been on it. Well, that's not really true because they're both on teams that maximize your defensive potential. But even still, like Jason Tatum is a great scorer. He's really good at driving in the lane. He's really good at knocking down frees when you need him. He's just a solid player overall. And that's in comparison to Kyle Korver, where he lives by the free, dies by the free. If he's knocking down frees, then he's a great player. If he's not, well, I mean, you're not going to get the greatest passing out of him. You're basically going to get no defense out of him, so he's not going to be in very much in the late game situations. And yeah, I mean, you just don't get that much out of Kyle Korver.
See, okay. Kyle Korver, I like him a lot because he has this weird like reputation of sort of like nobody criticizes him for being such a one-dimensional player, even though he kind of is. But at the same time, it's like he puts in so much effort to not be that I guess he sort of mitigates any criticism because you kind of know he's trying his best, which is all you can really ask for. I mean, and he's also really old. Like he's 37, so he looks kind of young, but like people need to be aware that he's one of the oldest players in the league probably. Yeah, I like Kyle Korver. He's an amazing shooter, but he sort of suffers from the same issue as J.R. Smith, where it's like if he's knocking him down, you love him, but if he's not, then you can't have him on the court, which is really unfortunate because Kyle Korver is one of my favorite players. He just seems like such a nice guy, and obviously his brother passed away at the end of the regular season. So condolences to him, but he's unfortunately he's a really one-dimensional player. So I guess I'll use more of this comparison opportunity to talk about Jason Tatum because wow, like so I've watched a lot of I watched every Cavs Celtics game this year. I watched the first game of the season. I watched the where Gordon Hayward was injured. Then I watched the game in January when Isaiah Thomas could have played but didn't play, and then I watched the game after the trades. And every game, and then obviously I watched today's game, which was game 1 of the Eastern Conference Finals. And what I will say is just remarkable that Jason Tatum literally in every game has gotten better. Like he has actually, like he's doing things in the so this is the 4th game I've watched them play this year. And if you just, obviously, like his first game obviously is not going to be some fantastic game or whatever, but like even if you compare it to the last game he played, he's sort of like Donovan Mitchell where he just adapts and he becomes better. Like I'll describe this play to you that he made. So there are a couple minutes left in the game and it's already it's like a 14-point lead, right? And so basically, Boston was leading by 28. Cleveland cuts it to 14 to end the third quarter. So you start overtime, or not overtime. You start the fourth quarter with a 14-point lead for Boston. And, it looks like Cleveland is building momentum, and there's going to be a pretty exciting fourth quarter where it's, Cleveland's going to be probably trying to come back from what's going to end up being maybe around like a 4-point lead or something like that. But Jason Tatum just immediately starts the fourth quarter just not allowing that to happen. He He grabs the ball from the inbound. Cleveland misses a shot. He grabs the rebound, and then he goes all 94 feet, and then he Euro steps, and then he makes a layup, and then the crowd goes crazy, and then he goes on the other end. He gets a defensive stop. He gets the ball again, and then he dribbles the ball up the court. He sizes up, I think it's J.R. Smith or Jeff Green or something. He sizes someone up, and he hits a three straight on in their face, and it's nothing but net. And then he's responsible for essentially 5 points and a defensive stop in a matter of like 45 seconds. And it's just like you can really see that he's already a star in the making, and it's really brilliant to watch. He's really stepped up, and obviously he's helped some by Brad Stevens' system, but there's no denying that he's extremely talented, and he is going to be one of the bright spots of the league for the rest of the decade. He's really going to be special. I really look forward to his battles with Ben Simmons in the coming years in Boston, Philadelphia, and maybe if Utah can get it together and make an NBA Finals. I'd love to see him and Donovan Mitchell just try and score on each other. That would be a lot of fun. So yeah, Jason Tatum is really, he's for real, and he's gonna be an excellent player. He did a fantastic job throughout. He's going to do a great job. I think in this series, he's going to do his best, and he's done a fantastic job in the playoffs thus far on both ends.
Yeah, he's a really impressive player, and the NBA always needs more rookies that are stepping up and just making us feel good about the potential of the NBA after LeBron James retires, and we certainly haven't had a shortage of that this season, which is awesome to see, as always.
See, the thing about him, the thing about Jason Tatum is, so there are a lot of comparisons between, or LeBron James was asked a question, how good he thinks his draft class is. And he said that he thinks it's the best draft class since 2003, which is obviously his draft class with Dwayne Wade, Carmelo Anthony, and Chris Bosh. But then if you look at the three best players from the 2003 draft class, LeBron James, Dwayne Wade, and Carmelo Anthony, and then you look at the three best players from this draft class so far, Donovan Mitchell, or this rookie class, I won't say draft class, I'll say rookie class. You have Ben Simmons, Jason Tatum, and Donovan Mitchell. And then you see some direct comparisons. Ben Simmons is similar to LeBron James in the passive style, the passing play style and the playmaker mentality. Obviously, some differences, but same basis. Then you see Donovan Mitchell. He's a lot like Dwayne Wade in terms of a great scoring rookie who's going to make baskets. Not an excellent 3-point shooter, but does most of his work around the rim and in the mid-range area. That's Donovan Mitchell. And then from a scoring perspective, Jason Tatum is really similar to Carmelo Anthony, not in the sense of. He's like how Carmelo Anthony would have been if Carmelo was in a good team situation where he's like if Carmelo Anthony had been drafted to the Detroit Pistons and was playing on that championship team instead of in Denver where it was useless, he would have been like Jason Tatum with defense. So it's really cool to see, how because Jason Tatum, like in terms of his ability to size players up individually, his ability to play in isolation, make threes, make mid-range shots, the creativity around the rim, he's a lot like Carmelo Anthony, just with defense. And, Carmelo Anthony obviously developed a post game later on in his career, but from a rookie perspective, they're very similar in terms of how they play. And this is exactly how I imagine Carmelo Anthony would have been had he been drafted to the Detroit Pistons with the second pick instead of Denver with the third pick. And I think that's really cool to just to kind of look back and see how, I think this class, along with the 2015 draft class, because, that was Karl Anthony Towns, Devin Booker, and who else was drafted in 2000? Kristaps Porzingis. Those three, and then that draft class along with you got Ben Simmons from last year, and then you got this draft class with Jason Tatum, Donovan Mitchell. So I think those are going to be probably the best stars of the future. So it's really cool that you can draw comparisons between them and players who have obviously made a huge impact for the last decade or so.
Yeah, and honestly, that debate over the best draft classes in like the past 15 years or so might come down to the controversy, the quote-unquote controversy over whether Ben Simmons counts as part of the draft classes or not. Obviously, we've talked about how he definitely belongs to the rookie class, but him belonging to the draft class this year is a bit less sure. So like that might cause problems for them. But even still, you got players like Teodosic coming up, and you've got it. Can't think of anyone else off the top of my head. Maybe Josh Jackson has a better year next year. Who knows?
No, you got Lauri Markkanen.
Oh yeah, Markkanen. I forgot about him.
De'Aaron Fox, Dennis Smith Jr.
Yeah, I'm not a De'Aaron Fox fan, but Dennis Smith Jr. is good.
Kyle Kuzma. Kyle Kuzma I think is actually going to be pretty good. He just doesn't play defense, but he's pretty good offensively. 16 points, 6 rebounds per game as a rookie. 27th pick in the draft, very impressive. Lonzo Ball, whatever. I mean, 8 assists or 7 assists a game as a rookie is not bad. He's probably going to be a pretty good playmaker. He's probably going to peak at around 15 points, 8 assists, or no, 15 points, 10 assists, 7 rebounds.
Wait, hang on a second. Hang on a second. How about the Jazz get Lonzo Ball? How about that?
LeVar Ball would never let it happen, but it would be good. It could work.
Okay. I don't know. Maybe we can get LeVar Ball on board with the Mormon thing. That could help.
Yeah, definitely. Mormon baller brain.
Yeah. Okay. So I don't know. We can send him. We can use what's his name? Crap, I forgot. Who's the guy who founded the Mormon Church?
I have no idea.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll look that up later. But we can resurrect him or something and get him to let LeVar Ball let his son play for the Jazz, because God knows the Jazz need a backup point guard. Okay, so that's the small forward position. Then we move on to the most no-brainer pick of today, the power forward position, LeBron James versus Marcus Morris. So, obviously, it's just an opportunity to talk about these two players and their performance in the playoffs. But obviously, LeBron James, best player of all time, best, he's basically playing as well as he ever has. And this actually gives me a great opportunity to bring up a stat that I found where, and by I found, I mean it was told to me on the Lab podcast, and I will reappropriate it for my purposes. So apparently, by Box Plus Minus, this is LeBron James's second best playoff run ever, behind his 09-10 run to the finals against the Magic. And that makes a lot of sense, just in terms of like how well he's played, despite the fact that his team has just not played well. I know we made some comparisons to that in that Pacers series, but even in the Toronto series, aside from game 1, he really hasn't slowed down, and he's just playing incredible. And like it reminds you of that conference finals performance against the Celtics, I think it was, where he was just putting up 40 points per game, and he was just leading a team that had absolutely no one on it. You had just Mo Williams and Boobie Gibson, and the person who's probably doing it with his mom, Delonte West, and yeah, just like a whole bunch of nobodies, and he led them to the finals. And in a lot of ways, that's what he's doing this year, with just a hodgepodge of characters that were basically acquired at the midseason trade deadline. He's just, and aside from that, like the only players that are left are either Tristan Thompson or like a bunch of players that are going to retire soon. Jose Calderon, Kyle Korver, and I'm trying to think of anyone else. Even Jeff Green, he's getting up there in age. So yeah, like it's just LeBron James has had nothing, and he has led the team past an incredible Pacers team that, like, I'm really excited for next year. I said something stupid in one of the podcasts that they were going to win 60 games. They're not going to win 60 games, but
who is
the Pacers? Like, that's not happening. They're going to get like a solid 50, but still,
they'll get to 50. They'll probably get to like 53 maybe or something.
Yeah, like it'll be a really exciting team next year, and like they put up an amazing fight against the LeBron James team, and yeah, like if they. I think they could have made the conference finals and given the Celtics a real run for their money, just based on the amazing job that Nate McMillan did against LeBron and not really shutting him down.
Like
but
the Pacers Celtics series would be like looking in a mirror, except one of the mirrors has Victor Oladipo and the other has the worst players, I guess.
Yeah.
It'd
be an awesome coaching series.
I mean, if LeBron James trains an ankle for one of the games, we're talking about the Pacers Warriors in the finals, maybe. So, yeah.
Yeah, imagine that.
It's crazy to think about, but I mean, people might think that it's crazy, but I mean.
Yeah, don't do the uni watch on that one. Those would not be some nice uniform matchups.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. You'd have to get the Warriors to wear white the entire series.
Yeah,
but I mean, like for anyone who's seriously doubting what Ryan just said about the Pacers going to the finals, I mean, that's actually not that absurd if you think about, if LeBron misses that one game winner in that game, and then they lose in overtime, and they don't win that series, and then you obviously get to Toronto, who's fraudulent as we all know, and then Boston would have beat Philly regardless of who made it out of the other round, and then you got Boston and Indiana, which would obviously be a closely contested series because they're both so well coached and make the most out of players who really aren't all that. So, that's actually really not that crazy to think of. It's crazy to think about, but it's really not that crazy. So, but yeah, as far as what you said about LeBron James, obviously he's been phenomenal. I'm one of the biggest LeBron James advocates ever. I think he's been playing brilliant. Today was, even though he didn't shoot the ball well in that game one against Toronto, he still really didn't have a bad game. I think he still ended up having I feel like he still had 30 points and maybe 10 assists and like 8 rebounds or whatever it is, but or maybe it was 27, whatever it is. He still had a really good game, but just wasn't efficiently scoring from the field. But if anyone else had a game like that, they'd be like, "Oh wow, great game."
Yeah.
But today, I think he actually legitimately had a pretty bad game because he shot, I think, 5 of 16 from the field at 15 points, which is probably the lowest that he's had in a long time in the playoffs. No, actually, that's not true. Last year against Boston, he had an 11-point game, but they only lost that game by like 1 point. So, anyways, yeah, LeBron's been fantastic. I've heard a lot of comparisons between this and his 09 season, but I think the difference is that a lot of people have been bringing up is that in 2009 he was just playing basketball, and like he really wasn't in the same place mentally, because he really wasn't the whole sure how to win kind of thing, and then he went to Miami and that kind of changed him. Because I heard Doc Rivers actually made a pretty insightful comment for the first time in a while. He said that when he was playing against LeBron in Cleveland, LeBron was just playing basketball. But then when he started playing him in Miami, he saw that LeBron was reading stuff, reading plays, calling out plays, telling teammates where to go, and that he said that was legitimately scary because that meant that he had finally evolved into the next step of being a player. And obviously, since then, LeBron has won 3 championships and is obviously a smarter and more experienced player than he was in 2009. So this might be the best playoffs from LeBron James that we've ever seen in terms of a full body of work. Obviously, we have to see how well he plays in the finals, but I'm sure that it's going to be the same result of where he plays fantastic and then gets criticized because they lose to a team with 4 All-Stars when he really only has 1.5. Yes, I said 1.5 because I consider Kevin Love half an All-Star because half the time he chooses not to show up. LeBron for sure over Marcus Morris. I'm not sure if you saw that comment, but Marcus Morris said that he's the best player in the league defending LeBron aside from Kawhi Leonard.
Oh, wow.
He said that. And he said, I'm the best guy in the league to defend LeBron aside from Kawhi. As of right now, he backed it up pretty well. LeBron shot 5 of 16 from the field and only had 15 points. I really don't think that had that much to do with Marcus Morris, though. I feel like it really just had to do with LeBron having an off night shooting the ball. He really wasn't being all that aggressive. He missed some easy layups that he usually makes, and he was missing a lot of threes that were open as well. So I think it was more about him missing shots than it was Marcus Morris defending him really well. But he only took 16. Usually you see him in the high 20s, or in the 20s or high 20s. So it was maybe he wasn't able to get as many shots off. But regardless, I'm sure LeBron will have a bounce back series. Probably end up winning the series in 6 games. So away from him, he's been fantastic on both ends. Making threes that I didn't know he was capable of making it. He's been showing that he's a lot more agile than I think he gets credit for because he's making off balance threes with 1 minute left in games. It's crazy. He really evolved into a different player under Brad Stevens, which is another reason why I think Brad Stevens is amazing because Marcus Morris was not hitting off balance threes to put you up 3 with tie game in the playoffs with 1 minute left when he was in Detroit and Phoenix. So, but regardless of how well he's been playing, obviously you can't put anyone in the league over LeBron James, in my opinion. So,
yep.
Yeah.
And that ultimately decides it. So, yep. Then we have the center position, which is kind of a no-brainer as well. We have Al Horford and Kevin Love, and this gives me a great opportunity to mention something that I forgot to say. So, Zach, if you're listening, you ridiculed me for saying Al Horford was not only deserving of being an All-Star, but was one of the best centers in the league in the first half of the season this year. Not only did he keep that up, he's been one of the best performers in the playoffs this year. He's been one of the best defenders this year. And he's been doing a fantastic job. He's the best player on the Celtics right now. He's been the player that Brad Stevens certainly relies on the most. As Aradh said earlier, Brad Stevens has the defense funnel everyone to Al Horford so that he can dominate them in the paint. And he's the linchpin that holds this team together. And he's just an absolutely fantastic player, whether it be him setting awesome picks for pick and rolls or just scoring in the paint or even passing out of the post. He's been a fantastic player, and that is something that's been invaluable to this team. And I just couldn't imagine the Celtics being the same if Aaron Baines was running 30 minutes a game. That would just be a completely different team. And I'm frankly really proud of Al Horford and like just how far he's come from the Hawks. Because like if you think of those Hawks teams, he wasn't this good then. Like he was still good. Like you don't win 60 games without a productive center, but he wasn't this good. So
He was better statistically, but he wasn't this good. I agree with you. And as far as him being an All-Star, I mean, he's like he wouldn't have been an All-Star if he was in the West, but there really wasn't anybody in the East that was better than him. Like I would not have given it to Kevin Love over Al Horford because Kevin Love, well, one, he broke his hand, but so obviously you couldn't have. But he also wasn't. He had that like 20-game stretch where he was completely unproductive. And then he was just inconsistent, I guess, up until the All-Star break. So I don't really see why you would. And I think Kevin Love is the only player that you could have given it to, aside from Al Horford, because anyone else there was Goran Dragic, who was a replacement for the East. There was, I mean, I guess maybe if you wanted to see Ben Simmons in the All-Star game, I guess that kind of makes sense. But I mean, no, Al Horford, the first time of the season, he played really well. I think he was blocking almost 2 shots a game, 13 points. 8 rebounds, 5 assists. He's one of the best passing centers in the league, that's for sure. Yeah, I mean, Al Horford's he's not the most talented guy in the world, but he plays the right way. He plays very smart. He plays very composed. He sets good screens. He does all the little things that don't show up in the stat sheet, which is obviously very important. He's one of the reasons that they went to so many games. And I figured, I don't know, I figured Zach would be higher on Al Horford, seeing as he's a Celtics fan. But I don't know, maybe he doesn't like maybe he doesn't like his ugly jump shot or something.
yeah.
But I mean, Al Horford. I'm going to give it to him over Kevin Love simply because Kevin Love has just been so inconsistent in the playoffs. Obviously, Kevin Love is more prone to, he's more capable of going off for a better statistical night in terms of his scoring and his rebounding. But there's just no way that Kevin Love is not going to outsmart Al Horford. He's not going to outpass Al Horford. He's not going to He's not going to outbox out Al Horford. He's not going to out rim protect Al Horford. He's not going to out defend Al Horford. Al Horford is just overall going to be able to do much more to impact the game than Kevin Love is, because if Kevin Love isn't scoring the ball, then there's basically no point on having him on the floor, because as a rebounder he's fine, but he's no better than LeBron is at this point. Even though he averaged more in the regular season and throughout the playoffs, I think he grabbed like 6 today. And, you want your power forward to be grabbing more like 10, 11 rather than 5, 6, 7, whatever it is. But I'm going to go with Al Horford over Kevin Love, just because you never know. Kevin Love has the same issue as the other Cavaliers. I think the Cleveland has a lot of good players. The problem with it is they're not consistent. Like they can't even consistently give you their average from the regular season. It's either they're going to give you much over their average or they're going to give you way under their average, which is why their averages are so strange. So, I think Al Horford is probably going to do as much as he can to sort of minimize Kevin Love's impact inside. Kevin Love is probably still going to be able to get some open threes and stuff, because Al Horford's not going to be on the perimeter all day, because he knows how vital he is to the team's post defense. So it'll be an interesting matchup, because it's kind of like a clash of two styles, I guess, because the way Al Horford plays defensively is exactly like the way he plays defensively is exactly what you don't want guarding Kevin Love. But then on the other end, it's like Kevin Love is probably going to get outplayed by Al Horford, because he's just not a good defender at all, and Al Horford is a much smarter player. He's one of the I think if you were to build a team in the NBA based on IQ alone, Al Horford would definitely be probably the starting center on that team. I think he's for sure the smartest center in the league. He's just always in the right spots. He's always just doing everything he can basically to have an impact on the game. And he's a good teammate. You see him. He's the leader of this team right now. Like he's their veteran voice. He's the one who's obviously probably encouraging them in the locker room, and just really nice. So I like Al Horford. And Kevin Love, I like Kevin Love too, but he just hasn't been be the better matchup in this series. I really think it's interesting how Cleveland literally has the disadvantage in every matchup except one, which is really unfortunate. So.
Yeah, and one of the big things for Al Horford is he's only 31 years old, in a league.
Really?
Like, so yeah. And whenever he looks way older than that, but yeah, like he's only 31 years old, and like in a league, obviously, where like every player is like 25 or like 27 or whatever, like that's still kind of old, but still, like I could see him playing into his late 30s and still being a productive player. So yeah, he's got plenty of years on him still, and that's really exciting.
He's been in the league for like 2 years. I guess he's been since he was 18, huh?
Yeah, and like that's one of the things I love about the NBA is just you get such long careers at these players, and like yeah, you get some players with checkered injury history, but for a lot of players, you can see them playing like 20 years and just being consistently there, and like even if they're like a role player or something, you get someone like Calderon where he's just there for like forever, and like it's just you get a whole picture of him.
Yeah, Al Horford this season shot 43% from three.
Yeah,
That's fantastic. 49% from the field, 43% from three, 78% from the free throw lines, 13 points, 5 assists, 8 rebounds, a block. Yeah, yeah, statistically it's not an all-star, but I mean when you think about how much he contributed to them winning, games in tight situations, I think it's fine to give him the nod, especially because I personally wouldn't have given it to Kevin Love given how inconsistent he was playing at the beginning of the season. So, but yeah, I mean, I like Al Horford. I think he's going to be instrumental. If they're able to win this series, he's going to get a lot of the credit for it. I think because he should. I think Al Horford is probably the most direct extension of the coaching staff. Like, I think I think the way that all of Brad Stevens' messages sort of get translated onto the court or through Al Horford, because Al Horford is probably the most communicative player on the court, given that he's the anchor of their defense and he's the veteran on the team. I feel like it's probably like he's literally like the extension of the coaching staff. Like Brad Stevens will tell Al Horford something to get across on the court, and then Al Horford will sort of carry the example for everyone else. And like if Brad Stevens is telling them to push the pace, then Al Horford will be the one encouraging everyone to push the pace. If he's telling them to slow down, he'll be the one to encourage them to slow down. Or if he's telling them to work harder on getting boards, they'll do that. Working better on passing the ball, Horford will do that. Tell them to shoot, they'll do that. He's probably the best example setter on their team. And, obviously you have that's of importance because, like, I'll give you, like, I personally, like, for example, I think if Al Horford was on Cleveland, right, I think that you'd probably get much better play from, like, Jordan Clarkson, Rodney Hood, Larry Nance. Like, I just feel like he's sort of like a sponge, I guess. Like, I feel like he's just a good teammate. Like, it kind of just comes across in the way that he plays and his demeanor on the court. And he's done a lot of stuff for this team in big situations. So, yeah, Al Horford for sure over Kevin Love. To me, I mean, I wouldn't be mad at someone for saying Kevin Love because like it is factual that he's going to give you more points and rebounds, which ultimately are important. But for me, I'm going to go with Al Horford.
yeah, he'll make a great coach eventually. Hopefully he does.
I think he would. He would do a good job as a coach.
Yeah. Okay. So I actually took the time to, for the benches, just list every player on the playoff roster for both teams. So we're going to get some interesting pronunciations here. So for Boston, their bench, they have, and I just did it based on minutes per game in the playoffs instead of win shares. I figured that was a better measurement. So I have Aaron Baines, Marcus Smart, Shane Larkin, Semi Ojeleye, Greg Monroe, is this guy's name? Abdel Nader, and
Yeah, later, yeah.
okay, and then here we go. Guershon Yabusele. I think I got that right.
Yeah, I think it's Gershon Yabusele. Yeah, it's something like that.
Okay, so yeah, and that's the Celtics bench, and then we have Larry Nance Jr., Jeff Green, Rodney Hood, Jose Calderon, Jordan Clarkson, Tristan Thompson, Sedi Osman, and Ante Zizic. So yeah, those are the two benches. I think it's not really much of a competition that's in favor of the Celtics, even though they only really have like two good players on their bench. It's better than all of the Cavaliers bench, which basically just comes down to Tristan Thompson and then maybe Jose Calderon if he's hot from free in a given day.
Yeah, I mean, it's really a shame because when you read the names off like that, it's like Cleveland's bench is infinitely more talented.
Yeah.
They're just none of them play well. I mean, Rodney Hood finally today was relatively aggressive coming off the bench. He had like 10 points, I think, which was pretty good to see. But I mean, for the most part, it's just the fact that Boston's bench just plays better. Like they play smarter. They don't force anything. Whereas you have Jordan Clarkson, whose favorite possession, as I've been saying, is to dribble the ball for 7 seconds and shoot a contested jump shot. That's literally his favorite play. That's what he does every time he gets the ball. Rodney Hood has been inconsistent. I'm not sure if you heard, but apparently he refused to enter Game 4 against the Toronto Raptors because he just didn't want to play garbage time minutes, which is dumb because he's playing like garbage, so you should play garbage time minutes, and it's an opportunity for you to show that you actually can get more minutes.
Yeah, you should get fired for that.
Yeah, Tristan Thompson he came alive for like 2 games, and now he's back to Tristan. Then, Jose Calderon he's old, and Jeff Green, I mean, he's fine, I guess, but
Yeah.
he's legitimately probably the only viable bench piece. I don't know why Teron Lewis completely abandoned Larry Nance Jr., but for whatever reason, I wish he hadn't, because I think Larry Nance is important for giving them energy. And I think him and LeBron had a stretch in the regular season when they were playing a lot of minutes together after the trades, where they were like one of the best duos in the league in terms of their net rating on the court together and all that. So I don't know why you wouldn't have them on the court together, because like Larry Nance is an ideal big man to play with LeBron in terms, because like he's athletic, so like they would run the court together, get lobs, get a lot of openings in transition, that kind of stuff. So, but Toronto's not playing him, so there's nothing to say about that. And yeah, I mean, overall, it's unfortunate because Cleveland's bench is definitely more talented. The players individually are all better, but how they play collectively is just so they played together so poorly that it makes the Celtics bench that much so much better, because even though the names on the Celtics bench are just like whatever, like they just play so seamlessly together that there's barely a drop off when they're off the court. And it was interesting today. I think there were three of the starters were hot today in game one against Cleveland. So Brad Stevens, I think he didn't play much of the bench today. I think he only played three bench players, but obviously we saw his utilization of the bench in the other two series prior to this, and Semi Ojeleye gives you good defense, and then you've got Shane Larkin, who's, I think we both are not Shane Larkin fans.
No,
he does whatever. Like, I mean, even though he's out there, he's obviously a liability in literally every facet. There's little drop off because of how well the team plays. And then you got Marcus Smart, who's actually a huge difference maker.
Oh yeah.
I think coming back in that Bucks series was actually one of the things that changed this playoffs for them.
Yeah, he's awesome. Even though he's horrible at literally everything he does individually, he makes the team so much better.
It's so strange how it's so weird how he impacts the game, because he's just not. He's probably one of the least talented players in the league.
Yeah, I mean, he's essentially the worst shooter in NBA history. But
his field goal percentage, I think, is like 35% for his career.
Yeah.
And despite that, he's able to overcome that and still get the ball in right spots offensively, even though he's not an assist guy per se. And then defensively, his impact is actually crazy. Like he's not very tall, but he's so strong. Like he actually is an excellent defender. It's crazy actually to watch him play defense. It's really great actually. And then I mean, it's weird because it's so weird because he's such a bad shooter, but he has those weird nights where he's just really good from three. Like I think last year in the playoffs, he had one night. I think it was in game 3 of the conference finals last year against Cleveland. He had like 6 of 6 threes or something, or 7 of 7 threes or something like that. He had like 20 something points, so that was kind of crazy. And then he hit a three from the corner with LeBron contesting him in this game today. I was watching a brief moment of it, but yeah, Marcus Smart, I think, is probably what gives Boston's bench the biggest advantage, because he's just so good at elevating his teammates, whereas Cleveland's bench doesn't even play as a unit. They just kind of play individually and just try and score. Like Rodney Hood has no chemistry with anyone. Jordan Clarkson has no chemistry with anyone. Larry Nance only has chemistry with LeBron, but he never plays with LeBron. Tristan Thompson only has chemistry with LeBron, but he rarely plays with LeBron. And yeah, I mean, it's just Boston is just. I feel like Boston's bench is they're all a unit that plays for one another, whereas Cleveland's bench is a unit that plays all for themselves, which is just dumb. So yeah, I give the edge to Boston's bench as well, but it has nothing to do with talent. It literally has everything to do with how they play together.
Yep. Okay, so there's that, and then this one's going to be a wipeout. So we have the two coaches, and those being for the Celtics, Brad Stevens, who we've both been saying has done an incredible job with this team. It's essentially the only reason they've been this competitive, and really it's miraculous what he's done for their defense. And then on the other hand, we have we have Tyronn Lue.
Yeah, Brad Stevens. Yeah. I'm not even exaggerating when I say this. I feel like you could make I feel like you could have a legitimate discussion about who's a better current coach in terms of Brad Stevens and Greg Popovich.
Yeah, definitely.
Because Greg Popovich obviously has a fabled history and he's brilliant and everything, but I mean, how confident are we that Greg Popovich could take this group right now and take them to the conference finals in the East? Like, I mean, I don't think Greg Popovich Greg Popovich. Maybe he could get them
No,
to
I
beat
think
the.
actually no, I think they could because just what he did what he did with the a worse Spurs team and like getting
Yeah,
him.
he could, right? But like, I mean, I'm not saying Brad Stevens is better or anything. I'm just saying there's legit discussion that you could have. Like, you could argue for Brad Stevens to be a little bit better currently than Greg Popovich because, I mean, Brad Stevens obviously had Kyrie Irving and he played in the East, so it was easier to win more games in the regular season. But I'm just saying, postseason wise, like, I mean, maybe Greg Popovich would probably do just about this well as well. So, like, you could have a debate about like, oh, like, if Brad Stevens had a healthy Kyrie all year, they would have won like 60 games, 61, 62 games or whatever. And Popovich last year when he had Kawhi won 61 games. So
Yeah,
obviously the comparisons are a little bit different because the West and the East and all that. But regardless, Brad Stevens is phenomenal. I think he's either the first or second best coach in the league. I really don't even think that's debatable. I think it's either Pop or him then Pop, and I don't think there's any way around it. So obviously, Tyronn Lue is probably like, I don't know, the 21st best coach in the league. Who knows?
yeah,
Who knows?
something like that. I,
See, but the one thing about Tyronn Lue that I will say is he's horrible at making adjustments and he's horrible about lineups, but he's really good at calling timeouts at the right times. He's actually really good at that. I remember watching in the 2016 NBA Finals when they won the championship. He did a great job in out coaching Steve Kerr. He was calling timeouts at all the right times to halt all the Warriors runs, and he was making really good adjustments. I don't know why. Maybe he's just all of a sudden gotten too old to make good adjustments because he's aged so much in his tenure in Cleveland. He's aged like 10 years in 2 years, as we've discussed time and time again. But yeah, he's really not. He's not a good coach in terms of in motivating defensively or running sets or anything like that. He's really just kind of there. So, but yeah, so Brad Stevens definitely gets the edge, but Tyronn Lue is good at calling timeouts. I will say that.
yeah, he knows when he has to go to the bathroom, I guess.
Oh yeah, there was that one time when he wasn't on the bench. Then.
Yeah. Okay. So just in terms of what I have that the favorite needs to win, I'll just read off what I had written down. So honestly, just shut down the rest of the Cavs with Brad Stevens' defensive scheming and force LeBron to pull another performance like he did within the Pacers series. That's your only hope. And then for what the underdog needs to win, continue with the solid offensive performance they had against the Raptors, and that's essentially it, because LeBron will be LeBron.
Yep. Yeah. Is so wait. Remind me again. So we cover what the favorite needs to do to win and what the underdog needs to do to win.
Yeah.
Okay.
With the favorite always being the team with the higher seed.
Oh, okay. Yeah. What the Celtics need to do to win is just. I mean, they just need to. They need to take the Indiana approach. Make everything go through LeBron. Make LeBron individually beat you with absolutely no help from everybody else. Hold everybody to under 13 points or so. Just make LeBron go for 50 because he's not going to be able to do it every night. Some nights he might be able to. Some nights he might not be able to. That's your best chance. It's really because the worst thing you could do is try and stop LeBron, because if you try and stop LeBron, then you're not going to be as focused on stopping everyone else.
Yeah.
And then LeBron is going to set everyone else up, and then LeBron is going to play well, and they're going to play well. So I think the best avenue for success against LeBron James, which is what the Warriors have been doing the past couple of years, is just seal off everyone else, and then make LeBron. Well, it used to be LeBron and Kyrie, but now it's going to be LeBron. So LeBron individually has to beat you because he has to create for everyone else. So if you shut off everyone else, he can't create for anyone else. So all he can do is score the ball and try and figure something out. So put LeBron in a tough situation. Make LeBron make all the big plays. Make LeBron literally do everything. Tire him out. Exhaust him. Don't let him take breaks defensively. Get Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Al Horford. Always have a new body on him, so he has to adjust constantly. Don't let him get too comfortable guarding one guy, because then he'll figure out their tendencies because he's such a high IQ player. Switch it up. Have Terry Rozier on in one play because then he has to deal with more speed. Put Al Horford on in one play because then he has to deal with more strength. Put Jason Tatum on in one play because then Jason Tatum can learn how to guard him, I guess, better. Jaylen Brown on in one play because he's a good long defender. Marcus Morris on in one play because he's a bigger, more his size kind of player. All that stuff. So just keep switching it up on him. Make it exhausting. Make it as exhausting as you can on him. Hopefully you can get him to cramp up, and then that'll happen. So, for Cleveland to win, LeBron LeBron is going to need to be great. He's going to need fantastic, and it's kind of crazy how we just expect that from him at this point. It's like if he ended up averaging like 41, 10, and 8 for this series, we're literally not even going to bat an eye. We're just going to be like, oh yeah, it's just LeBron, winning series or whatever, which is insane. But that's you get accustomed to greatness, I guess. So he's going to have to make plays for everybody else. Kevin Love is going to have to step up and make shots. Kyle Korver is going to have to make shots. J.R. Smith is going to have to find some consistency somewhere. Rodney Hood is going to need to continue trying to make an impact and actually try and score the ball. Jordan Clarkson needs to feature all of his minutes. Not an exaggeration. He really just needs to stop playing. He's not good. I think Rodney Hood is better than he is, and Jordan Clarkson is really ineffective. I think you got to improve Larry Nance's minutes, but that's probably not going to happen because Toronto doesn't know how to coach basketball. Whatever it may be, regardless, Cleveland kind of just needs to get it together and play like they're playing the Raptors. Play confident, play motivated, play like you want to prove something, and play like you actually want to get to an 8th straight NBA Finals for LeBron and a 4th straight Finals for this Cleveland team. Because they would only be the 5th team in NBA history to make it that Finals for the 4th straight time. And then if the Warriors do it, they would be 6th. Like they'd be the 5th and 6th teams because only 4 have done it so far. One of them being LeBron's Heat. LeBron would be the only player to do it twice. And and I think he'd be the only player outside of that Celtics dynasty to have made 8 straight because he's already the only player outside of the Celtics dynasty to have made, I think, 6 straight. So, yeah.
Yep, exactly. And it goes back to your point that you made earlier about people, not anyone complaining about it necessarily, but his 15-point game against, I think it was the first game against the Raptors, people, nobody had any complaints about it, just it being below his standards, and it's the exception that proves the rule, that we have such high expectations of LeBron James because we know he's great already. And we expected him to get 40 points a game in the playoffs and just play like the best player ever in it and lead his team to victory. And if you expect that from him, then it says a lot about what he really is. And I don't get why people don't give him more credit for his incredible performances in the finals, like that finals against the Warriors, basically every year where he puts up 40 and 15 and 10 or whatever, and he gets a triple double in the finals every year, and then he just plays out of his mind. It's just he doesn't have enough firepower to compete with him, and then everyone's like, "Oh, look, LeBron lost another finals." It's what exactly do you want him to do? Do you want him to be Wilt Chamberlain? It's just ridiculous.
Yeah, and I mean this is a discussion for another day anyway. But I'm willing to discuss with anyone about how if Wilt Chamberlain and Bill Russell switch places, there wouldn't even be a discussion about who's better.
Oh yeah. And especially because all of those finals, if you look at the actual point differential and stuff, it all comes down to a game 7 where it is the Celtics win by 2 points, the Celtics win by 1 point. So even if you just start flipping a coin or something, it gets you look at maybe Wilt having 5 championships, Bill Russell having 5, instead of a situation where Wilt was always losing them. But yeah, he had absolutely no help in the early 60s on those Warriors teams.
Exactly. I mean, I'll since we just finished the 1 second, let me see if I can find it.
Actually, we should probably give our predictions for the series just to close this one out. So,
okay.
So for me, I have Cavs in 7, just because I don't see how LeBron can lose in the Eastern Conference anymore.
Yeah, I'm going to take Cavs in 6. I just think that they'll bounce back and win Game 2. Probably wins Game 2 and 3 and 4 at home, then lose Game 5 in Boston, and then win Game 6 back at home.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah.
Yeah. So since we have a minute, do you mind if I go on in this little rant?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we only have the Western Conference.
I was friend of mine so Wilt Chamberlain has scored as many as 50 points per game this season. He has 7 scoring titles, 7 rebounding titles. Bill Russell has never scored more than 19 points per game in a season. And Wilt played with less Hall of Famers. He did not have a legendary coach. He led the league in rebounding 7 more times, scoring 7 more times, and Wilt Chamberlain also led the league in assists once. He was also much more efficient. His career field goal percentage sits at 54%, and Bill Russell sits at 44%. Wilt holds the NBA record for rebounds per game over a career, tied with Michael Jordan for the NBA record for points per game over a career. And then I gave the analogy to my friend that saying that Bill Russell is a better individual player would be the equivalent of saying that Kevin Durant is a better individual player than LeBron is, simply because he has more talent around him that outplays the talent that LeBron has around him. And then I said, I agree that Russell might be considered a greater player because he's such a pioneer of team success and won 11 championships, but he's not better. Russell might be greater, but Wilt is better because if they switch places, Wilt would have 11 rings too, but Bill Russell probably wouldn't have two. Wilt holds a single season rebounding record, single season scoring record, single game rebounding record, single game scoring record, highest single season rebounding average, highest single season scoring average, most career 30, 40, and 50-point games. Only player with back-to-back 60-point games, had 14 straight 40-point games, which is the longest streak ever. Also holds the second longest streak ever with 10 straight 40-point games. Most points per game by a rookie, never averaged less than 18 rebounds in a season, never averaged less than 20 rebounds in the playoffs. Most double-doubles all time, highest place player efficiency rating in a single season. Only player with a scoring, rebounding, and assist leading season. Only player ever to lead the postseason in points, rebounds, assists, and field goal percentage. Only player ever to have a double, triple-double, meaning 20-plus points, 20-plus rebounds, 20-plus assists. Only player to have a double quadruple, meaning having 40-plus in two categories, such as 40 points and 40 rebounds. He did this 8 times. Most games leading both his team and the other team in points, rebounds, and assists. He never fouled out in a single regular season or playoff game, despite averaging 46 minutes per game in his career. His fouls per game sat at only 2. He's the second oldest player to win Finals MVP, second oldest player to lead the league in rebounding. He was 36 years old. NBA record for field goal percentage in a single season, most consecutive seasons leading the league in field goal percentage, and I'm not exaggerating when I say that there are a lot more.
Yeah, no kidding. That's not even including all of the more, I wouldn't say controversial stuff, but stats that we know are less sure of. Those being his block and steal totals, where I've seen the databases of newspaper clippings where like they, yeah, or like an Excel spreadsheet where like they're all tallied up. And if I realized we were gonna have a Wilt discussion, I would have prepared my research. I literally have a folder on my phone that's just called Wilt versus Russell debate, and yeah, like just based on like 80, I forget if it's 800 games of their career or 80 games, probably 80, just because 800 would be insane if they had that much data. But yeah, Wilt has like 2 more blocks per game and like 1 more steal per game than Bill Russell. And yeah, I don't understand why people make the argument for Bill Russell being better than Wilt Chamberlain. And like, I really don't understand it if anyone says he's the greatest of all time. I don't think anyone does that, but if they do, they would just be morons. Like, let's be real. So yeah, like that basically closes that debate. Hopefully, we can get into that again sometime, so I can actually pull out my research on that, because yeah, literally I have a folder that is like just a bunch of arguments from people, and like just either like Reddit posts or like this basketball forum that I always forget what it's called, that does a lot of great basketball debates. And like, it'd be awesome if we could just have a podcast where we break down misconceptions about like past NBA players or something, because
Oh yeah, I would love to do that actually, because I have a lot of issue with rankings. Like I hate when players say, like, when people say stuff like Jerry West, Oscar Robertson, Bill Russell, Gail Goodrich, Elgin Baylor. I mean, I hate that. Like,
yeah,
the league was nothing like it is today. Like, the fact that people legit, and like, I mean, okay, even another player actually that, I mean, I might get a lot of flack for this, but Larry Bird is really,
oh yeah,
no, Larry Bird would not survive in today's league. Like, Larry Bird would probably be at his best, like, Dirk Nowitzki towards, like, when he was averaging like 18, 19, 20 points a game. Like, maybe. Like, Larry Bird was unathletic. He really wasn't that good of a defender. I know he made 3 all-defensive teams, but still, like, that, he was maybe pretty good for a brief period, but he was unathletic. I mean, people always say that he was such an amazing three-point shooter, but he really wasn't. I mean, he averaged 0.7 three-pointers per game in terms of makes, meaning that it would take him about 3 games to make 2 threes. Yeah. And he was only a 37% three-point shooter, so it's not like he was some astronomically efficient three-point shooter where he was like in the 40s or something like Steph Curry or Klay Thompson or something like that, or even Ray Allen is a 40% three-point shooter. He wasn't a volume shooter, so I don't understand why people think that he was such, like, whatever.
Yeah, and on the point that like people make every time when they discuss Larry Bird, it's like, oh, if he was like today, where everyone was practicing their free point shots, if he had the chance to do that, because the 3-point line was just invented in 1985, and like he didn't have enough time to practice, Yeah, well, that's not remotely true. If you look at someone like Pistol Pete Maravich, he was always shooting the ball from that far away, like behind. Obviously, the 3 point line didn't exist back then, but if you watch like footage from games he played in, he was shooting from that far back, and he was shooting at like a good enough clip where it was like, okay, if there was a 3 point line here, he would have been shooting better than Larry Bird. So I don't want to hear the point that Larry Bird would have been this way better if it was the way it is today with how we train players. So that's a crappy point too.
Also, I mean, like, there's just so much that factors into it. Okay, like Larry Bird, also like everybody criticizes LeBron for having a chilled performance in the NBA Finals in 2011. I've never once heard anybody criticize Larry Bird for having back-to-back 8-point games in the NBA Finals, and for a cornbread Maxwell, that's Cedric Maxwell, who's a role player who averaged 12 points per game in his career and is not a Hall of Famer, won Finals MVP in place of Larry Bird because Larry Bird averaged 15 points per game in an NBA Finals. I've never once heard that criticism of Larry Bird. I've never once heard that, and I don't understand why that is. Like, I mean, people don't criticize Magic Johnson for the tragic Johnson moment where he dribbled out the clock. People don't talk about Larry Bird going back-to-back 8-point finals games. Nobody talks about Michael Jordan losing in 1995 to Orlando. Like, I don't understand what it is. I mean, the media scrutiny of LeBron James has gotten so ridiculous to the point where just everybody else past sins have been forgiven, and it's really annoying. But yeah, I mean, Larry Bird, like, he played on one of the best teams of all time. Like, the '86 Celtics are a top 5 team ever, probably, and like they had so much talent. Like, it's not like, I mean, it's really like, I really don't. I mean, yeah, he was a really good rebounder and a really good passer. Like, he was a pretty versatile player. But I mean, it's not like he's like. I also, one thing that I dislike is like LeBron James has consistently averaged 7 assists, close to 8, 7, 8 assists a game for his career. But like, people don't consider that he's been doing that playing with such bad players for a majority of his career. Like, LeBron James did not have another co-star in his career until the 8th season of his career. The best player in his first 7 seasons, which is essentially half of his career, was Zydrunas Ilgauskas, and he was averaging 7 assists a game, despite that. And then
I've never even heard of him.
Zydrunas Ilgauskas?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, Zydrunas Ilgauskas he's a pretty important. He's an icon in Cleveland, I guess. Jersey's retired. He wasn't great. He was like 11 points per game, but he was one of LeBron James' most viable teammates throughout the first 7 years of his career, which is actually pretty depressing. But he was fine. 11 points per game, 8 rebounds, whatever. He was a power forward, not a good defender, just a double guy sometimes. So yeah, so Jonas Ilgauskas was the second best player basically for his first stint in Cleveland, and he was averaging 7 assists, and then he gets to D Wade and Bosh, and then Kyrie and Love, and he's still averaging 7, 8 to 9 assists a game. Like, like, I don't understand why people don't understand that it's more difficult to get assists when you play with worse players. Because if you're playing with Shaquille O'Neal, then it's very easy to just dunk the ball to Shaquille O'Neal, and then he's going to get a basket. Like, that's the thing with Larry Bird, is that Larry Bird played with like all these Hall of Fame players. Like, if you need an assist, all you got to do is hand the ball to Kevin McHale, and then he's going to score inside. Like, I mean, so Larry Bird averaging 6 assists, I think, is a little bit. I think that's a little bit. It's a little bit of a skewed statistic. And then 10 rebounds a game. I won't try and take away from that because I mean it's hard to get rebounds, but Larry Bird would not be the player that he was given if he had played in today's league. I mean, for anyone who disagrees with that, then whatever. I mean, if that's your opinion, then I don't know why you have such a weird attachment to Larry Bird, because I mean, there's nothing about him that makes me feel like he could be of any like. Because there's a player comparison for all these legends, right? Like, Magic Johnson is like Ben Simmons, then LeBron James is like a fusion of whoever you want, basically. Then you have like, Kareem, I guess you could draw a comparison between, or Hakeem Olajuwon, for example, you can draw a comparison to like Joel Embiid. Kareem, no one really has a skyhook, but you still have big men who are really good, inside scorers and defenders. But like with Larry Bird, it's like there's no player in the league who's scoring 24 points per game that's making 0.7 threes a game. Like, it's just not. He wouldn't be doing that if he played in today's league. So.
Yeah. It is kind of weird that like no players have adopted the skyhook, actually, because it was such an efficient shot, and it's not like it's
Yeah, I don't know why. I don't know. I've always thought about that. I mean, maybe it's just extremely difficult to do, and he was one of the only people who could master it. But I feel like someone should just practice it and just get efficient with it.
Yeah, I mean, it's still just as unblockable as it always was. And if you just get a 7-2 center that's taking it, I mean, they're only going to be better at it today.
But why doesn't like Jonas Valanciunas learn that? Then he can become unstoppable.
No, that'd be great.
But yeah, no, I would love to cover all those players because I mean, like, I just feel like it's so. I just think it's unfair that like you have all these excellent players who are seen as worse than other players, despite the fact that those other players played against such less competition. Like there were like what 11, there were like 8 teams in the league when Bill Russell was dominating the league or something like that. Like every team makes the playoffs, so like your whole league is basically your playoff bracket, and like you're just playing horrible teams to advance and stuff. Like it's just like honestly, like the NBA and like when Bill Russell was playing, literally could have just been wilt against him, Wilt trying to bring other groups of people to try and beat him or whatever it may be. But
Yeah.
I'm not sure if it was really 8 teams. That's
No, I think it was 16 to be honest, but let me check. Here.
16. I think was as early as I think 16 was later on. I guess yeah, you can check in like.
Actually, I think you're right. I'm thinking of baseball now that I think about it.
Yeah, how many teams were in the league when Bill Russell was winning championships?
Yeah, let me see. But yeah, definitely for I know we talked about previously maybe not recording next week. I changed my mind. We're recording next week, and we'll do like a recap of the first couple games, and then we'll just dive straight into like going basically through the career win shares leaderboard and just doing a profile of each of the players and why they're either overrated or underrated. Give a historical comparison to like a player of today, and yeah, like just giving the fans some information on these players because. I agree. I don't want people to think that Larry Legend is some great player when he was good. He basically made the NBA the popular league that it is today. But I mean, he's not like a top 5 player in NBA history like some analysts would lead you to believe.
Yeah, I mean, also there's just some stuff that I want to like debunk. Like, I mean, like I think Kobe Bryant is a top 10 player of all time, but some people think that he's legitimately better than LeBron. And I mean, Kobe is great, but like, I mean, come on, like really, like Kobe Bryant never shot above 47% from the field. He's a 33% three-point shooter for his career. He's a 44% shooter from the field from his career. His career averages are like 25, 4, and 5. He has 5 rings, but he has 2 Finals MVPs. He had 3 years without Phil Jackson and an All-Star big man, and he did make the playoffs and lost in the first round twice. Like I understand Kobe Bryant is a great player, but I mean there are people who literally try and make just like arguments for Kobe Bryant as the greatest player of all time, which is just absurd to me.
Yeah. Okay. So I did the research, and apparently in 1960 there were only 8 teams, and then up until 1960, is that 7 or I guess you can say 1968 there were 9 teams in the league. So yeah, for basically the majority of that Wilt Bill Russell rivalry, there were only 8 teams in the league, and in the Eastern Division and Western Division, 3 teams made it. So obviously 3 out of 4 and 3 out of 5. So yeah, that's not good.
Yeah, so I mean, that's absurd. Like,
Yeah, and obviously that being the Eastern Division, where having only 4 teams, so that 2 of those being immediately the 76ers and Celtics. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and then like, there's just so much about different players that like I can't. I'm sorry, but I cannot accept an argument that says Oscar Robertson is better than Chris Paul. Like, who did Oscar Robertson play against? Yes, he averaged a triple double and get it. How many teams was he playing against? 5, 6, like whatever. Like, I mean, Oscar Robert, and like even I feel like the one exception to this rule I think is Wilt one because I think we've discussed his crazy athleticism and just like his overall dominance just makes it seem like he could have been like obviously he wouldn't have been like 50 points and 27 rebounds, but he could have been maybe like 30 and 15 or something, right? So like he's someone that we consider like maybe as being able to transcend time with his crazy athleticism and his leaping ability and all that stuff because the videos of him are just so like he just looks like he would be a great athlete regardless of when he's playing. So, he's someone we consider from another time. But another player is Kareem, right? Because Kareem, like, he proved that he could, because he played in, like, he was the best player, like, in the transition from, like, the league being the cocaine league and being, like, an actual league. So, he played really well in both. So I think Kareem is another player we can give the benefit of the doubt to, is saying that, we can't hinder his legacy by uh, by saying that he didn't play in a real league, because he proved it in both. But I mean, I think it just gets a little shaky when you have guys like Bill Russell, right? Like, I'm sorry, but Bill Russell is not averaging 23 rebounds per game. Okay, I know that Wikipedia says he's 6'10", but he's really not.
Yeah.
And like he was thin. Like, it's not like he's going to be boxing out all these all-star big men. I'm sure he probably would have. And given that he only averaged 18 points per game then, or 19 points was his career high, and he only averaged 15 points per game for his career, he probably would be closer to 11 or 12 points per game now. So, yeah, I don't think that I think that needs to be more discussion about modern players as being higher up on the all-time list. Yeah, just because their overwhelming talent, I think, is just so much greater than the players of the past, because the game has evolved so much and just includes so much more. For example, Kevin Durant, I think, should be looked at a little bit higher. Steph Curry should be looked at a little bit higher. Chris Paul.
Oh yeah, definitely Chris Paul.
LeBron, obviously. Even players from I'm not saying that these are top 20, whatever it may be, but there's just so many players that I'd love to discuss, because for example, I've been talking about with one of my other friends, Scottie Pippen, for a long time, about how nobody understands the importance of Scottie Pippen. Why? Why do people just put him aside as being, oh yeah, he got carried by Michael Jordan to six? No.
Yeah, I mean, he broke the Jordan rules.
Yeah, exactly. He did. He broke the Jordan rules, and he literally, his first season without Michael Jordan, the Bulls went from winning 57 games to winning 55. They went from, with last season with Michael Jordan before he retired for the first time. So in 1993, they won 57 games and they won the championship. Okay, and then he leaves to go play baseball, and Scottie Pippen finishes second in MVP voting. He averages 22 points per game, 9 rebounds, 7 assists. He finishes on first team All NBA, first team All Defense. He wins All Star Game MVP, and he takes them to Game 7 against the New York Knicks in the second round of a very tough Eastern Conference. And he's one bad play call away from going to the conference finals, where he probably would have beaten whichever team it was. I can't remember off the top of my head, and made it to another NBA Finals. I don't understand what it is. Obviously, yeah, you need Jordan to get over the hump and win championships, but, let's not act like Jordan would have been able to get over the hump without him either. He played 3 times in the playoffs without Scottie Pippen. He was eliminated in the first round each time. And, they weren't even really – they didn't even have a winning record until Scottie Pippen got there. And Scottie Pippen essentially did more without Michael Jordan than Michael Jordan ever did without him.
Pacers. The Indiana Pacers.
Oh, yeah, okay, I'm not sure then. I'm not sure how good they were with Reggie Miller and all that, but still, whatever it may be.
Yeah, they took the Knicks to a 7-game series there. So.
I also don't understand why everyone just assumed that if Michael Jordan didn't retire, that they would have beat the Rockets. Who the hell in the Bulls is going to guard Hakeem Olajuwon? There's more perimeter help to stop Michael Jordan on the Rockets than there is post help on the Bulls to stop Hakeem. If he stayed, maybe Michael Jordan might be 5-3 or whatever. Who knows? Who knows what would happen if he actually played Hakeem Olajuwon?
Yeah, I don't know what the pundits would have said then if he didn't have his undefeated record in the finals.
Yeah, God forbid, he's 6-1. Also, if he's still, there's just so many flaws in this argument, with about Michael Jordan, because yes, he's 6-0, and I'd never try and take away from the fact that he's undefeated, but why does everybody just ignore the years that he didn't get there? It's like the haters of LeBron James would rather that he doesn't make the NBA Finals. They think it's better to lose in an earlier round of the playoffs. To say 3-5 is worse than 6-0. Yes, it is from a winning percentage standpoint. Yes, and when you consider LeBron should probably have one more because of the 2011 thing. Yes, that makes sense. But it's he's been there 8 times, but they try and minimize it because they think that it's. Why? Do they think that it's better for? Do they think it's better that Michael Jordan made less just because he won more? I don't. It doesn't make any sense in terms of never counting the 95 loss, never considering the fact that he couldn't get through the bad boy Pistons until they were old, saying that he beat the Showtime Lakers, she really didn't. It was after Magic Johnson was not in his prime anymore and Kareem wasn't there. Yeah, like it's just they ignore so much, and then I mean the teams that he played in the NBA Finals were never as talented as his were. Like he played the Suns who had Charles Barkley, and then that's it. And then they played the Jazz who had Karl Malone and John Stockton. Okay, that's two All Stars compared to their three. And then there's the
Supersonics, obviously. So you had Gary Payton.
Yeah, Sean Kemp and Gary Payton. That's two again. Then I mean, are you going to consider Detlef Schrempf an All Star? I mean, maybe he made one, but he wasn't some superstar. I mean, and like also, like Michael Jordan never did anything without Phil Jackson either. Like me and Doug Collins for all those years, why couldn't he do anything? I mean, I don't know. It's just there's so much surrounding Michael Jordan's 6-0 other than him, and it's made to be this thing where it's like, oh my God, Michael Jordan 6-0 in the NBA Finals. He was such an amazing scorer. Like, I agree, Michael Jordan is he's a top 3 player ever. Like he's one of the most talented figures ever. But another thing that's never even considered in the argument for who the greatest player of all time is, or the best player of all time is, whatever you want to call it, is something that I think is really annoying, and it's of the players who are all considered top 10 NBA players of all time, none of them had a worse situation coming into their career than LeBron James, because Magic Johnson, for example, was immediately brought in Kareem Abdul-Jabbar to help him. Kareem had Magic, and he also had Oscar Robertson brought in to help him. Michael Jordan was immediately brought in Scottie Pippen to come help him win.
Oh, no, I don't know about the argument for Michael Jordan. He was on some bad Bulls teams for like 5 years.
For the first 3 years. But eventually they turned it around by bringing in Scottie Pippen, and they hired Dennis Rodman, right?
Yeah, but fair enough. Like, it took LeBron like 8 years to get something reasonable.
Yeah. I mean, Michael Jordan to a lesser degree, that's true. But, like, the first opportunity that the Cleveland Cavaliers had to give LeBron James a legitimate help as an all-star, they drafted Carlos Boozer, or they traded for Carlos Boozer, in 2004. And obviously, he's not like an amazing player, but he developed into becoming an all-star for a couple of years. And they lost him in restricted free agency.
Yeah, that's bad.
His first year, like, their management was so incompetent that his leading scorer going to the NBA, his second leading scorer going to the NBA Finals was some guy named Drew Gooden or Larry Hughes, one of those guys, who was averaging maybe 11 points per game or something. Like, none of them had worse. None of those teams had worse team management than LeBron. And I agree with you, Michael Jordan. His first 3 years were pretty awful, but they were still making the playoffs. So like it wasn't as bad as the situation LeBron was in terms of that, at least, because and then he was injured 1 year. But regardless, I mean, Scottie Pippen came the third year. So he was drafted in 84. So that means that he played 85, 86, 87. And so, yeah, he played 3 years without Scottie Pippen, but one of those years he was injured. So he really played 2 years without Scottie Pippen. So, I mean, yeah, like he was given help, in my opinion, relatively early into his career. And then obviously you had Horace Grant come in, and then they had, Luke Longley, Ron Harper, and then you have, obviously later on, you have Dennis Rodman. I mean, LeBron James has never had the luxury. Like, Skip Bayless has been trying to make some ludicrous argument about how LeBron has had more help in his career than Michael Jordan. But, like, I looked at the numbers, and, like, it's just insane, like, how many more, like, if you add up, like, Dennis Rodman and, like, LeBron James has never played with a teammate who's made first-team All-NBA while playing with him. He's never had a teammate make an all-defensive team while playing with him. And in total, throughout his entire 15-year career, he has only had a teammate make an All-NBA team 4 times. And those 4 times, 3 were from Dwayne Wade while they were in Miami. All 3 were All-NBA third teams. And then 1 with Kyrie Irving, which was also All-NBA third team. But the year that Kyrie Irving made All-NBA third team, he didn't play in the finals because he broke his kneecap. So, I mean, and he's never played with a defender that's been better than him, whereas Michael Jordan played with 2 of the best defenders of all time, Dennis Rodman and Scottie Pippen. And, people try and make all these arguments about how, like, Scottie Pippen and Dennis Rodman weren't these great scorers. Jordan just carried all the scoring load. Like, they don't understand that, or they just choose to ignore the fact that, I mean, 22 points per game is more of a help when you're only scoring 85, 86 points per game. Like, I mean, so they try and compare this, like, oh, yeah, Kevin Love averages 20 or whatever, but Scottie Pippen only averaged 22. So why are you saying that Michael Jordan had all this more help? Well, it's because 22 is a greater percentage of 86 points per game than 20 points per game is out of 120 points per game. So, I mean, yeah, I'm just kind of going on a tangent just to kill some time, but we can discuss all of this another time.
Yeah, certainly. I was getting a little nervous because I didn't want to push you too far. Okay.
Oh yeah. No, I was looking at the clock. I was going to finish up around 11.
Oh, okay, cool. So then we can get into the series that we have been predicting basically since the start of the season, the de facto NBA Finals, what really this entire regular season and playoffs has come down to. We have the Rockets versus the Warriors. So I don't know if anyone really would have predicted at the start of the season that the Rockets would have home court advantage, but they actually do. And this might be the most interesting matchup series that we can go through. So I guess we'll start at point guard, where I think we're both going to make the more controversial pick here of Chris Paul over Steph Curry.
Yeah, I'm going to. And it's not any indictment on Steph Curry. I still think Steph Curry's fantastic, amazing, great, best point guard in the league. But I just think that he coming back from injury and the fact that Chris Paul is going to be so tenacious defensively, and also just given the fact that I want Chris Paul to win because I think it'd be beautiful to see him finally make it to an NBA Finals after all the years that he's put up with trash. I'm gonna be rooting for Chris Paul, so I'm gonna go with Chris Paul. And I'm not trying to trigger anyone out there. I don't think Chris Paul is better than Steph Curry because Steph Curry is fantastic offensively and is a game-changing, revolutionary talent. I understand all of that. He's amazing. But Chris Paul, I'm just going to go with him because, it's more important for him, I feel like. Steph Curry is still, recovering from his injury. So, and he kind of has that weird thing where, like, he has a weird string of games when he's returning from an injury because, he'll have he'll have one great game where he's looking bouncy and explosive, and then he'll have one game where he's just kind of limping around and doesn't look like himself, not moving laterally properly. So, basically, mostly based off of doubt from his MCL sprain, I'm going to go with Chris Paul. Because of the MCL sprain, because I want him to win, and because defensively he's a bit better.
Yeah, and just looking at the factors in the game, passing they're about the same, if not better, for Chris Paul. Just because, as we said, the best assist to turnover ratio. I haven't checked actually, but probably the best in NBA history. It's an absurd number. I forget what it is. I think it's in the double digits, but yeah, it's a ridiculous amount of assist turnovers.
I think it's like 10-2 or something.
Yeah, which is just ridiculous. But yeah, like just imagine getting that out of Steph Curry. Like, I get that the Warriors pride themselves on just flinging the ball around as much as they can and don't really care about turnovers. But I mean, if you could do what they do and not have to worry about the turnovers either, that would be amazing. So yeah, there's the passing. Then shooting, obviously, you could take Steph Curry's 3-point shooting. That's not really much of a debate. But it's not he doesn't blow him away on that. So, a little minor win there.
Yeah, Chris Paul can make threes. It's like the total that Steph will make will probably end up being only a few more than Chris Paul will make, by two maybe.
Yeah.
Obviously Chris Paul is more diverse in the mid-range and stuff. So
yeah. And where the debate really falls apart is just Chris Paul's such a better defender than Steph Curry, and I can't wait to see the matchup between the two.
Yeah, it'll be cool because obviously when we've seen him in the past when it was him on the Clippers, it's always been like Chris Paul has always played kind of to a standstill with Steph Curry, but it's always been like Blake Griffin ends up playing like trash, or JJ Redick doesn't have his shot on,
or Chris Paul gets injured.
Yeah, or someone gets injured. Exactly. But yeah, no, I think this will be really cool because it's like the first matchup that they have where they both have good, healthy supporting cast that probably won't disappear on them, be it by injury or by, choke. So I think it'll be cool.
Yep. Okay. So that's the point guard position. Then we have a shooting guard, and again, it's it's kind of controversial, but not really unless you haven't been paying attention at all this season. You have the shooting guard position where you have one player who's an MVP and one player who's probably the best 3-and-D player ever. We have James Harden versus Klay Thompson. This one's easy for me. It's obviously James Harden. If you put James Harden,
I love Klay Thompson. I think we both do. We've said a lot of great things about him. I think the past 2 or 3 podcasts, we love him to death. But James Harden, clearly, he's a better playmaker. He's a better he's a better rebounder. He's a better scorer. He's just more versatile. He's better adept at drawing fouls. He can actually put the ball on the floor. He can make layups. He's creative. I mean, Klay Thompson clearly the better defender, but that's really it. So
Yeah.
And I mean, 3-point percentage wise, he's better, but in terms of the amount that he can make, James Harden can probably match him just at a less efficient clip. Like Klay Thompson will probably make like 6 threes on 40% shooting, but James Harden might make like 7 or 8 on 35, 36% shooting, 37% shooting, whatever it may be. So I mean, it kind of comes down to the shooting, and to me really doesn't matter that much because James Harden overall scoring total will end up being more than Klay Thompson. So the fact that he's shooting more the 3-point shooting clip doesn't really concern me because James Harden is going to be concerned with shooting and scoring more anyway. So yeah, Harden for me for sure.
Yeah, and to be honest, if it wasn't this season where James Harden's been basically a league average defender, I would try and take the controversial pick and say Klay Thompson, just because he is.
But he's pretty good. He's actually been a surprise. He's been a fine. He hasn't been a great defender, but he's been fine.
Exactly.
You don't need to take him off the court ever for his defense, which I mean, in some situations before you might have had to, but no, I mean he's actually he's a competent defender now. Like he doesn't just let people go do what they want. I'm not trying to make any, I'm not trying to make any proclamations or anything like that. But I mean, he's done a good job blocking shots and getting he's always been really good at getting in the passing lanes. It's just been about on ball defense, but. He's done some good stuff this year. I mean, he's I think blocking a few more shots than usual, and he's just done a better job committing to that end.
Yeah, no, definitely. So yeah, good for James Harden, and he's well deserving of his likely MVP. All right. Okay, so do I want to go with the def lineup or not? Yeah, let's go with the def lineup. So at the small forward position, we have Trevor Ariza versus Andre Iguodala. This one isn't really that close either. We were talking. Oh, sorry, I didn't even notice you were gone.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, I said something, but yeah. So we both picked James Harden. So Andre Iguodala versus
Trevor Ariza, yeah, and this one isn't really competitive either. We've been talking about Trevor Ariza and how he's also a fantastic free and D defender in the past couple podcasts. He was always someone that I loved to watch when he was on the Wizards, and yeah, he's a really fun player, a really good 3-point shooter, and a really underrated defender as well. And he's really important for this team, especially since Eric Gordon's been having his struggles in the playoffs. And yeah, he gives some great minutes out of the starting lineup, and even though he's usually the player who gets pulled from the starting lineup first, if it's not James Harden or Chris Paul, he still is a very valuable piece for Mike D'Antoni. And yeah, I would take him over Andre Iguodala, even with his historical precedent for being a great playoff player.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna take Trevor Ariza as well. I like Andre Iguodala, but he's not the player that he was 3 years ago. He's gotten older. He's gotten less mobile defensively. He's making threes at a much worse clip than he used to. And Trevor Ariza is kind of doing all of those things. So, Trevor Ariza obviously isn't going to be able to control an offense in the same way in terms of his ball handling and be able to set guys up and stuff like that. But in terms of his 3-and-D play, he's going to be better than Andre Iguodala in both. So I'm going to go with Trevor Ariza just because his impact on the series will probably overall be greater. And I think the whole def lineup from the Warriors really isn't as good as it has been before because of Andre Iguodala's decline. He's aged a couple years in the last few years, so he's really not as good as he was in 2015 or 16 for that matter. And I think now he's probably only averaging close to 6 points per game, two assists, maybe 3 rebounds or something like that. I'm not sure exactly what his numbers are. I know his shooting percentages have been dropping ever since he was the Finals MVP. So, yeah, I'm going to go with Trevor Ariza as well.
Yeah. Okay. So then at the power forward position, we have P.J. Tucker versus Kevin Durant. This one really isn't that competitive. P.J. Tucker is a great defender and all, but Kevin Durant is a top 5 player in the league. He's an awesome team defender. How do we usually label him as we usually say he's a good team defender, not a good individual defender?
I personally say he's a better help defender rather than an on-ball defender, and a better team defender than an individual defender. Yeah.
Okay, that was what I thought. I just don't want to make a fool of myself. So yeah, Kevin Durant, he is what he is on defense, but on offense, he's a fantastic player. He's great in the isolation game. He's great in the catch and shoot. He's great at driving into the lane. He's He can even give you some production out of the center position when they want to do that, but usually they like to stick with Draymond there. So yeah, that's Kevin Durant and PJ Tucker. He can give you a couple frees if you need it. He can give you some awesome defense, but he can't lead an offense like Kevin Durant has been for the past two series for the Warriors.
Yeah, I mean Kevin Durant for sure. I like. I like. I like PJ Tucker, but like you said, I mean 3-and-D guy, not great on threes. He's fine. He's a great defender, but Kevin Durant is just. I mean, at his peak, he's probably the second best player in the world. So, I mean, I'm going to go with Kevin Durant. Definitely, I don't think there's like you covered all the bases. He's a great player in isolation, great player in mid range, 3-pointers at the basket, extremely efficient. I actually didn't know this about Kevin Durant, but this is just a fun fact for anyone who's questioning how well he played in the NBA Finals last year. Kevin Durant averaged 35 points per game on 56% shooting from the field, 47% shooting from the 3-point line, and 92% shooting from the foul line. So that's 35 points on a 50, basically 56, 56, 47, 92 shooting line, which is absurd. So Kevin Durant, I think, literally, it's not even a discussion in my opinion currently because Kawhi Leonard's not playing and he's not matched up with James Harden. It's not even a question to me that he's going to win a matchup against anybody in the league except LeBron. So.
Yeah. Okay, so that's the power forward position, and then we have the center position, which is Clint Capella versus Draymond Green. Clint Capella, he's obviously a very good center. As we mentioned last time, he's leading the league in effective field goal, not effective, just straight up field goal percentage. But I mean, Draymond Green is the best passing center in the league. You can argue that it's Jokic, but I think that Draymond Green does even more out of the post. And just based on assist totals, even I think that's something that he does very well. I think Jokic gets a little too many turnovers for me. And then on defense, I think it would still be Draymond Green. He does an amazing job blocking defenders up. We talked about earlier how he significantly hampered Anthony Davis in the post. So yeah, that's Draymond Green for you, and he can even nail a free or two if you really need it. And Clint Capella, you can dish it into him in right below the rim if you want to. You can get a couple dunks, but that's really all he can do, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to go with Draymond Green too, but one thing I will say is I think it's interesting that he's going to be matched up with Clint Capella because something that I've realized about Draymond Green is that he's actually much better when he's defending. It's weird to say this because it kind of seems a little bit backwards, but he's better when he's better equipped to defend players who put the ball on the floor. Because I think that when he because one thing that I always watched between the Warriors and the Clippers was that the DeAndre Jordan always did an amazing job against Draymond Green because Draymond Green had such a hard time keeping up with his athleticism, the fact that he was catching lobs, the fact that all he really had to do was just be at the rim and lay it in rather than creating anything. But as opposed to when he defends guys like, Kevin Love, when he defends guys like LeBron, even when he defends guys like Anthony Davis, who all put the ball on the floor to try and create something in the post and dribble a lot to get a post-up opportunity, I think he does a really good job kind of disrupting their ability to, maintain control of the ball, and he just makes it harder for them to actually score. Whereas when he's defending players who just kind of catch lobs and stuff, it's more difficult for him to keep up with that since he's not the most athletic guy in the world. That's just an interesting point that I think might give Clint Capella an advantage in a certain aspect. But overall, I'm definitely still going Draymond Green. As you mentioned, when he's playing, he plays power forward mostly because they're not always in the death lineup. But when he's at center, yeah, he's definitely the best passing center in the league. He led them in assists and rebounds last season. He gives you more assists than Steph Curry does, or a little bit more, or just the same usually. I think Steph gives you about 6, and Draymond gives you about 7. Or that's how it's been in the past, at least. And Draymond Green is just a versatile Swiss Army knife. He can pretty much do everything. He hasn't been shooting as well lately, but or for this season, for that matter. But he can still knock one down. He can get hot every now and then and knock a couple down. He actually, I think he made 6 of 8 threes in Game 7 of the NBA Finals 2 years ago. So he's a threat to go off if necessary, and if that happens in conjunction with everyone else going off, then you're really in some trouble. So I'm going to go with Draymond Green. But Clint Capella, I wouldn't be surprised if Clint Capella managed to outplay Draymond from a scoring and rebounding perspective, simply because he's bigger, and I think Draymond might have a tough time keeping up with his athletic leaping ability, simply because Draymond is definitely a more low to the ground kind of guy.
Yeah. Okay. So then we have the benches for the two teams. For the Rockets, they have Eric Gordon, Gerald Green, Ryan Anderson, Nene Hilario, Aaron Jackson, Tariq Black, and our favorite player is Zucchini, and then Joe Johnson. And then for the Warriors, we have JaVale McGee, Sean Livingston, Quinn Cook, David West, Kevin Looney, or Kevon, or I forget how to pronounce his name, Nick Young, Damian Jones, Zaza Pachulia, and Jordan Bell. So that it seems like this is a question of, do you prefer more talent up front, or do you prefer just a bench that throughout it has great players?
I'm going to go with the Rockets bench. Simply, not because it's sort of the opposite of what I was saying about the whole Boston Cleveland thing. Because for the Boston Cleveland situation, I was saying how Cleveland has better individual players, but they play better collectively as a team. This is kind of the opposite. I think the Warriors bench plays better collectively as a team because their system has no drop off. Because obviously we saw Quinn Cook fill in for Steph Curry with absolutely no drop off. Well, there was some obviously, but much less than you would have expected, not having Steph Curry basically. But the reason I'm going to go with the Rockets bench is just because, like the Chris Paul thing, I want them to win, and I just think that I think the Warriors bench is less equipped in years past to be able to hit threes. You got Nick Young, and he's really the only like great 3-point shooter coming off their bench for them, because JaVale McGee's obviously not shooting threes, Sean Livingston's not shooting threes, Jordan Bell's not shooting threes, Kevon Looney, Damian Jones, none of those guys are going to shoot threes. Whereas for Houston, you kind of have this attack no matter who's on the court, because Eric Gordon can shoot threes, Gerald Green can shoot threes, he can also dunk really well, he's very athletic. And then Luke Mute can defend and shoot threes. Then Nene is not as good as he has been in the past, but he's fine. And yeah, I just think that Mike D'Antoni is, because his system is simpler and easier to play in, I just feel like that's going to create more of an opportunity for his bench to be more successful, because he has the luxury of having James Harden and Chris Paul on the floor at all times. And because of that, those two players are always going to be able to elevate the bench talent around them. And overall for the series, I just think that's a luxury that Mike D'Antoni is going to have, is that, Steve Kerr is not going to be able to have consistent, excellent point guard playmaking play for 48 minutes a night, whereas Mike D'Antoni is always going to have that. Because when Steph's not on the court, you're really not going to have that sort of shooting. When KD's not on the floor, you're not going to have crazy versatile offensive scoring. When Klay's not on the court, you're not going to have terrific 3-and-D play. When Draymond's not on the court, you're not going to have point forward playmaking abilities and stuff. So, it's basically, I just think that Mike D'Antoni's system allows for more consistency throughout the game, because it's always going to be the same thing, where it's like you have one player who can play isolation, get to the rim whenever he wants, who's also creating 3-point shots from the outside for other players or for himself. And I just feel like it's easier for bench players to play within a system like that, where they specifically don't have to adapt much or change much. Whereas for Steve Kerr, it's kind of like, the bench unit kind of has to adjust to the play of whichever the best player on the floor is at the time, because, the bench is obviously going to have to play differently if they're all on the floor with Kevin Durant than they are with Steph Curry or with Klay Thompson or Draymond Green. It's going to be a different thing, so it's going to be more constantly changing for the Warriors, which I think will end up making it a little bit more difficult for them to play as consistently as the Rockets bench. But that being said, Steve Kerr probably won't have to go to his bench nearly as much as Houston will, because, the only players that you really need in the rotation for the Warriors bench are your 5 starters plus Sean Livingston and maybe Nick Young. So.
Yep. Okay. And yeah, I would agree with that. Eric Gordon has been having some trouble, but
he hasn't had a great playoffs, but I feel like he'll come alive sooner or later, hopefully.
Yeah, and frankly, the entire Warriors bench has just been cold, so I don't think that's really a point against a point really in favor of the Warriors. David West, obviously, he's been giving great production in the playoffs, but that's pretty much it. Quinn Cook, he hasn't been giving that much. Sean Livingston, obviously, and JaVale McGee, he's basically cooled off ever since that first game of the Spurs series. So yeah, okay. So then for the coaching matchup, we have Mike D'Antoni versus Steve Kerr. Obviously, we're both going to go for Mike D'Antoni since, we've talked about a lot how Steve Kerr isn't a great schematics coach. He's just kind of a player's coach, actually, and he just...
Yeah, he really is. That's a great way to put it, yeah.
And it's just that, Mike D'Antoni, the reason that the Rockets are running so well right now is because of his implementation of Morey ball and combining it with his 7 seconds or less style. And the Rockets go as far as his adjustments can take him and as far as he can keep Harden and Chris Paul in the game.
Yeah. I think it's the thing with, the coaching thing to me is interesting because, like Steve Kerr, like I mentioned earlier, is great at unlocking potential, but I don't think that there's anything more he can do with this Warriors team to make them better. You know, it's like Mike D'Antoni is still at this point where this Rockets team is so good despite the fact that he doesn't make adjustments. And, he kind of just runs with his whole 3-point, 7 seconds or less running gun system the whole time. But the thing that's impressed me with him is that he's made a lot of strides as a defensive coach. I think last year, they were like a bottom 10 defensive team. This year, they're a top 8 or top 7 to 9 defensive team this year. They've done a great job. And I just think Mike D'Antoni, I'm going to give the edge to him simply because when it comes down to it, Steve Kerr is not going to be able to really dictate how well the series goes at all. Like, it's not going to be up to him regardless. Like, there's nothing, in my opinion, that he could do to change how well the Warriors play. Whereas Mike D'Antoni has much more ability to have an influence on the series because of who he decides to put in with James Harden and Chris Paul, and because of the adjustments that he makes game to game, and because of his defensive schemes and how he chooses to defend Kevin Durant. I'm going to go with Mike D'Antoni, not because necessarily I think that he'll outcoach Steve Kerr, but because I think he has more potential to outcoach Steve Kerr than Steve Kerr has to outcoach him. Because, what is Steve Kerr is basically at this point famous because he runs good out of the timeout plays, which he just stole from Greg Popovich. So, I'm going to go with Mike D'Antoni just because, his system seems like, it hasn't hit a hitch in the road yet. It's worked against everyone in the league so far. They've beaten Golden State twice this year. And I know, obviously, the season series is different from the playoff series, but, it's good to have that in your back pocket. And another weird thing about this is the first time since 2014 that Golden State is going to be starting a series on the road. And I don't think Kevin Durant has started a series on the road since he played Golden State in 2016. So it's going to be an interesting thing for these guys to have to, go on the road for the start of a playoff series for once.
Yeah, I think that the home court's a big thing in this series, definitely. And like the fact that on Game 7, they're going to be on the road, and at Game 1, they're going to be on the road. And like those are the two most important games that you have to win. Like in Game 1, obviously.
Ideally, I would love for Houston to win game, because here's the thing. Here's what I think. I think Houston has made it very clear that they want to beat Golden State, because in December, Joe and Morey said they're obsessed with how to beat Golden State. And the whole year, obviously it's been pretty obvious that this team is made to beat Golden State, and then Draymond Green has even aggressed like their team is built to beat us, so we'll see how they do. So, obviously the Warriors feel like probably, the Rockets have been running their mouths and want to see them in the playoffs and all that stuff. So the one thing that I'm worried about is I think that if the Warriors come in and play their best basketball and they completely blow out the Rockets in Game 1, I just feel like Houston might be mentally devastated and not want to. They'll probably end up losing in like 5 games. So Game 1, I think, is extremely critical. It'd be like if Houston, to me, it's not a must-win game, obviously, but it's like a really, 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 really would love to win game, because you don't have your confidence shattered if you win Game 1 and then you lose Game 2 at home. Because if you lose Game 2 at home, like you're facing a team with 4 All-Stars. Like it's home court advantage wasn't really going to be some crazy thing anyway. Like you're going to need to win games on the road and at home in this series, but. I think the ace in the hole really for Houston is the fact that they have Game 7 in their home court, but they've got to get to Game 7 first, because the Warriors definitely have the potential to make this a quick 5-game series if they're completely locked in. So Houston really needs to do their best to shore up defensively and just put Golden State in situations where put Golden State in situations where they're not as comfortable as they always are. Because one thing interesting that's noted about this is that Golden State is actually such a good team in terms of their percentage from three, but they're actually only 17th in the league in three-pointers made, which is actually shocking given how
That's
great.
weird.
Yeah. I think that was the last time I checked the statistic, but they're not like some top five three-pointer made shooting team like we think they are. But I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that Steph Curry missed so many games this year, because obviously if he played a full season, he'd probably make about 100 more or so, and I'm not sure how much the differences are there. But I think if Houston can just outshoot them and just make more threes than them and just consistently outscore them while playing solid defense, I think that they have a really good shot of beating them. They just got to make sure that everyone's got to be in shoot around, making sure that their 3-point shot is on. Because if you're missing open threes, then there's just no chance that they're going to win.
Yeah, for me, I have don't get cold from free. Get Eric Gordon to play better. Don't let the Warriors run free on offense. So, like specifically in transition, the Warriors are the best team in the transition game. Don't let them just run straight for you. At least try and stop them and like make it so they have to run set plays to get their points and get production out of what?
I said put them in the half court, right?
Yeah, exactly, and get some production out of Capella in the paint because I mean you don't want your offense getting too one-dimensional with the shooting freeze. It's the entire purpose of Maury Ball is you shoot in the paint and you shoot from the free-point line. If you're just shooting from the free-point line, you're vulnerable, and then what happens when you get cold? So yeah, that's really big, and also try and slow down Kevin Durant if like they want to do an additional thing, because the Warriors' offense right now is way too reliant on Kevin Durant. Like they, even though Stephen Curry's come back, they're still running a ton of isolation for Kevin Durant as they were in the first round series, and that's not great for them because, as we've mentioned, the Warriors' offense doesn't run as well for Kevin Durant as it does for Stephen Curry. It's a not on the court, off the court thing. And yeah, like the Warriors need to change that first of all. But if the Rockets can exploit that by really trying to shut down Kevin Durant at the expense of some of the other Warriors, that could be big if Steve Kerr doesn't get them to adjust. And then for what the Warriors really need to do to win, they need to slow down James Harden on the perimeter and stay offensively productive, even if they aren't scoring a ton of points. Because I think a lot of people are expecting like a series where like both teams are putting up like 130 points per game and like everyone is just racing down the court the entire time. I really don't think that's going to happen. I think this is going to be not a low scoring series, but I think the points are going to hover around like 100 every game. And it's really going to come down to which offense is just more productive when, like, you're not scoring a crazy amount of points. Like, you're just being more efficient. You're taking the smarter shots. You're recognizing, okay, I don't care if it's the first quarter. It still matters if we're scoring a lot of points now because those points are going to matter in the fourth quarter when we have to either come back from a smaller deficit or they just don't have to worry about it as much. Like, that's a really big thing that like all the pundits seem to miss. Like the commentators will be like, "Oh, don't worry, it's just the first quarter or whatever." But no, like it's very significant if you're down by like 20 points in the first quarter because then you got to make up those 20 points at some other time. And yeah, like you just got to make sure that like they aren't wasting their time in the games because like the Rockets are really a team where if you give them a chance to take a lead, they'll either run you out of the building by knocking down a ton of frees, or they'll just make you regret it in some other way.
Yeah, I mean, for me, for Houston, what Houston needs to do to win is, I think you need to be physical with Steph Curry. I think that you need to, like, similarly to what Cleveland did in 2016, which is the only series that this Warriors team has lost since 2015, is you have to be physical with Steph Curry because you have to put him in a lot of situations where, he's – because I think, people don't really think about this that much, but I heard CJ McCollum talk about this actually. And, I knew this already, but, having confirmation from a player is obviously good. He said that, when you're running through a lot of screens throughout a game, you get exhausted because, like, watching it on your TV doesn't really look like it, but I mean, you take a big physical bump when you get hit by a hard screen. Like it's, like there's a grown man standing right there and you hit him full force. Like it's not like it's just something that you shake off and you're completely fine. So you gotta really put him. You gotta make it more difficult for him to kind of move around. You got to be more physical with him because when he's able to play with his finesse style, that's when he's at his best, obviously. But when he's hobbled and he's a little bit, exhausted and more tired, then obviously it's difficult for him to hoist all those threes and all that. So you got to be physical with Steph Curry first and foremost, so that he gets a little bit worn out. And then what you have to do, you have to make it so that Steph Curry cannot hide defensively. You have to have Steph Curry guarding either Chris Paul or James Harden every possession. You can't have Steph Curry out there standing in front of PJ Tucker, just guarding him on the corner. You can't do that. You have to get him switched on to James Harden or Steph Curry because obviously what the Warriors are going to want to do is they're going to want to have Klay Thompson guarding all the ball handler at all times. So they got to get Capella to come up and set the screen so that you can get Steph Curry switched on to either James Harden or Chris Paul because, let's face it, Steph Curry is not going to be able to stop either one of those guys. So that basically capitalizing on Curry's weaknesses, essentially his lack of physicality and his lack of perimeter defense. And then furthermore, I think James Harden is he needs to not have a bad game in the series, and that's unfortunate to say. But I just don't think that you can allow that many mistakes versus this iteration of the Warriors team, just because they have so much talent that even if they make a lot of mistakes, they can cover it up by the fact that they have so much talent. Houston doesn't necessarily have that. So James Harden is going to have to play. He doesn't have to play a flawless series by any means, but he has to play really well. He can't have a dud game where he has less than 20 points. He's going to need to have probably 25 in every game or so. And regardless of how he does that, he needs to get to the line a lot. He needs to not have crazy, inefficient scoring nights. He needs to do a good job. Chris Paul needs to be sure-handed as he always is. That's not much to ask from him. And I think he needs to bring in a mid-range attack because the Warriors have probably been looking at them game planning for threes and layups. I doubt that they have someone who's prepared to consistently guard Chris Paul in the mid-range, so that'll be good to throw at them because that's probably not something that they're focusing a game plan around. And overall, they just need to make their threes and be good on defense because, like you said earlier, I just think this is going to come down to who executes better offensively. I think defensively, everything will work itself out because you'll have KD on Harden where KD will exploit that, and then you'll have Harden on Curry where Harden will exploit that. So it's going to kind of be back and forth defensively. There's going to be runs and stuff like that. I think like you said, I think it's going to hover between 100 and 110 points. I don't think it's going to be crazy. There might be one game or two games that's 120, kind of higher, but for the most part, I think it's probably going to hover around the 100s, single digit 100s, as in 108, 109, whatever.
Yeah.
And then the Warriors, for them to win, they just KD and they need I agree with what you said. I think this is the one team in the NBA that you can't have Kevin Durant running your offense. I think you need to run your offense through Steph Curry. I'm not sure if that's just a thing where he's not ready all the way yet to be integrated as the focal point of the offense yet. Maybe he's not ready to run around enough. Maybe he's not conditioned enough because obviously he wasn't able to run when he had a sprained MCL, so he's probably not all that conditioned yet. But you've got to get the offense running through him because the Warriors offense goes from being having a 106 offensive rating to having a 121 offensive rating when it's running through Kevin Durant versus Steph Curry. So running it through Stephen Curry is going to be extremely important for them. Klay Thompson needs to play solid defense, but that's probably going to happen. And then Kevin Durant can't have a dud game either. He's probably he's not going to need to be as good as Harden in the series, but he's probably going to need to have 20 points per game. At least he's going to need to have 20 or more in every game. He's not going to be able to have a dead game, but that probably won't happen either. So I think the Warriors definitely need to do less to win because they have more talent. But that's not to say I don't think Houston is capable. I think ultimately what it's going to come down to for Houston is whether or not James Harden is MVP James Harden that we've seen all season, or if he's less than that.
Yeah, and that's what it's come down to in every series against the Warriors. Unfortunately, every other time he's been cold James Harden. He's been the choker. He's just been the player that you can't count on to run your offense through. He'll just throw a bunch of turnovers or get single-digit points, or he just won't be reliable. So obviously, we're both hoping that he'll be a lot better this time, and even if not, that Chris Paul keeps himself together because. He doesn't have a tendency of being a choker, even though everyone loves to label him as that. But even still, like it makes you a little nervous. So, what I'm most excited to see in the series is watching Klay Thompson try and shut down either James Harden or Chris Paul. That'll be awesome to see. And then Chris Paul doing whatever defense he can against Steph Curry, because that's always awesome to see. Some of Steph's best highlights come from facing Chris Paul. I remember that one where like he triples behind like the backs of like a bunch of different
Oh
people.
yeah, Clippers defenders. Yeah, I've seen that one.
Yeah, that was a great highlight. But yeah, that's what I'm most excited to see. Personally, I want to see the Rockets win just because, not many people are hoping for Warriors winning, going to four straight NBA Finals. And they're also one of the most winning franchises in NBA history just because of their history with the Philadelphia Warriors. So obviously, that's a detriment in my book. And then my prediction. So. I actually have the Warriors in 7. Unfortunately, I want to take the Rockets in 7. I really do, but I don't see how it can happen for them. I don't think the Warriors like the only way I can imagine is like the Warriors play like they did in that Oklahoma City conference finals from a couple of years ago. But first of all, I don't think that's going to happen, and like second of all, I don't think that this Rockets team is. I don't want to say they're not as good as that team, but like I think the Russell Westbrook in that series was better than what can reasonably be expected from Chris Paul at this point. I think Kevin Durant during that series is better than what we can expect from Harden. Obviously, aside from like the couple of games that they choked away, and like yeah, I don't see how the Rockets can win this game and this series in 7 games, even though all of the metrics seem to point to them being a better team. And also, just one of the biggest predictors of future championship success in the NBA is past championship success. And obviously, the Warriors have that over the Rockets. And that's not to say that the Rockets are like some franchise that can never expect to win the NBA Finals, but like just the Warriors' history right now, and like the fact that they've won 2 out of the 3 past finals, easily could have been free for the past 3. Like that just leads me to think that they're going to prevail over the Rockets. And really, I'm just hoping for a really competitive series because this is what we've been waiting for all season.
Yeah, I'm going to take the Warriors at 6. I just think that I think the way it'll work is it'll be it'll be like there'll be a split in Houston, then a split in Golden State, but then I think Golden State will take Game 5 in Houston and then Game 6 back in Golden State. I just think that Harden is brilliant, but if you just look at it, like Houston, despite how well they're playing, like to me, I'm not sure if you feel the same way, but when I look at their team, I just feel like there's one glaring hole. Like I just feel like they need one more piece. Like I feel like they're one superstar away, and it. I just and by superstar I mean like legit superstar. Like I don't mean like Paul George. I mean like LeBron, Kawhi. Um,
And that's the problem with facing the Warriors. Like the only way you can reasonably hope to beat them is to match them on talent. And like it, like a lot of people would say, "Are you kidding me? The Rockets already have so much talent." But I mean, just compared to the Warriors, like you can never have enough. And like
yeah, I mean, you really like. I understand what people are trying to say, but I mean, like if you really look at like if you just take the stars are there's 6 stars in the series, and Golden State has 4 of them. Like they have Steph, Clay, KD, Draymond, and then Harden and Paul. Because no one on Houston is individually a star who could be something somewhere else. Whereas you can make a case that all 4, for 2 of the Warriors, you know that there would be something somewhere else, and that's Steph and KD, and then Clay and Draymond, you can make a pretty reasonable case that they would be very good players elsewhere as well because of their skill sets. Whereas for Houston, it's like if anybody else other than Harden and Paul goes somewhere else, they're literally just a shooter or Capella, who's a big man who dunks, and plays some defense. So I just think the Warriors' talent is going to end up prevailing. I mean, this is the dynasty probably of this generation, and I think that we're going to have to wait one more year until it comes to an end, simply because I just don't think that there's any team built in the league yet that's built well enough to beat the Warriors. I think the only chances are if Philadelphia gets another piece or if Houston gets another piece. And then, obviously LeBron is the piece that most of his teams are going to be looking for because he's done he's literally done his absolute best to combat the Warriors, essentially by himself. Aside from 2016 where he had a good amount of help, and then 2017 he had some help too. But I mean, what are you going to do when there's 4 versus 2? So, and I think Warriors at 6 just because they're still the prohibited favorites. I mean, it's like everyone's been saying all year like Houston is this, Houston is that, but at the end of the day, like just because they had a worse regular season doesn't make them less equipped or anything. Though I think the only interesting thing really, or not the only interesting thing, but an interesting thing to watch would be like if Steph Curry still isn't ready though for the offense to run entirely through him, and the series starts off running through Kevin Durant for the first 2 or 3 games, then I think this series can be extremely compelling, and then I would probably change my pick midway through. But as for right now, I'm going with Warriors at 6. I would have loved to pick the Rockets as well in 6 or 7 because I personally believe that LeBron James this year, given how well he's been playing, would be able to overcome James Harden and Chris Paul. And I don't know why. I just feel more confident in his ability to beat Houston than I do Golden State, just because Golden State would have such a numbers advantage. But at least if he was if LeBron was playing Houston, then at least you can. If Kevin Love placed a par in that series, because you wouldn't have Kevin Love really he has his worst series against the Warriors, so I feel like he'd probably be relieved to play someone other than them. So him playing Houston would probably be pretty good for him, and he might have a good series. And then you have LeBron and Kevin Love versus Chris Paul and Harden, which isn't an even matchup, but given how well LeBron plays against certain teams, sometimes he does the work of about 2 All-Stars himself, as he did against Toronto. So, and then obviously I think if also Houston would probably, if they were to beat Golden State, they'd probably need 7 games, whereas LeBron will probably only need 5 or 6 to beat Boston.
Yeah.
Probably 6 because he probably won't win 4 straight. But regardless, it'll probably be an easier series on LeBron than it will be for the team coming out of the West, which is obviously going to be an advantage in terms of rest and all that. So, I'm going to go Golden State at 6, and then we'll end up having a finals rematch for the 4th straight time. Yeah.
Yep. And I'm crossing my fingers that we don't come back on and LeBron is down 3-0 in the series. That would not be fun, but obviously winning that series after a 3-0 deficit, that would solidify him as the greatest of all time. So,
Yeah, I feel like he might not take that chance though. I feel like maybe later in his career he might just try and see what he can do with it. But
yeah, just imagine in a 1-8 matchup where the 1 seed is just hey, we want to be the first team to ever do this, so we're just gonna, we're gonna blow a couple games. No, and nobody will remember that
he could sit out with a fake injury for the first 3 games.
Yeah, you just pull a Rondo and go out in a wheelchair.
Yeah.
Oh, that'd be great. Yeah, that was the most BS injury ever. You can't come back from being in a wheelchair and then play the second half.
I think that was Paul Pierce you're thinking of, not Rondo.
Oh, my bad.
Yeah, but I know you're talking the Paul Pierce wheelchair thing. There was a rumor that he apparently only did that to rile up his teammates.
Yeah, no, I saw that too.
That he was just trying to motivate them or something?
I mean, that's the only way it could happen. You don't just get in a wheelchair and then come back a half an hour later and play in the game. That's not how it works.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know. But yeah, that aside, that concludes our playoff previews, playoff recaps, and our little teaser for next week's Hall of Fame, or I don't know, whatever it is, just player profiling or changing your perceptions of the overrated and underrated players in NBA history. So if you enjoyed listening to the podcast, make sure to give us a review on iTunes. That would help a ton. Tells me what I need to change. Maybe you don't like listening to my voice. I can help that. I can get a modulator or something. I can call T-Pain about that. I'm sure he has some help. Also, make sure to give us a what do you call it? I don't know. Just give us 5 stars, whatever that means. Just do it. It helps. I think, probably. It makes me happy. So do it for me. You should also give us a subscribe on YouTube. You get all of the unedited streams and all of their glory, because I'm sure I'm gonna have some editing to do this time. Yeah, that's pretty much my justification. I like listening to unedited things because I get the whole picture. I get to listen to it as if I was actually there. I don't miss the little boring parts because hey, there might be little nuggets of gold in those boring parts. So yeah, that's what I do, and you should do that as well. Give me a comment if you came to the YouTube channel just because of that. And yeah, you know what? We're gonna see you next week. We're gonna have a good time.